Coming up on episode 337 of Wheel Bearings, we got the Ford F-250, the Subaru Outback, Paris raising parking fees for large, heavy vehicles. Ford sets up a skunk works to develop low-cost EVs. Americans are losing trust in AVs. Cybertruck's got some really significant safety issues. Kia unveils refreshed Carnival and K5 in Chicago. Ford's killing active parking assist. The Chrysler Halcyon EV concept. The pole-to-pole Nissan Ariya, and more. All that coming up next. This is episode 337 of Wheel Bearings. I am Sam Abuel-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
And I am Nicole Wakeland from The Road Reflected.
And Robbie is off visiting family this weekend, so it's just the two of us.
So it's the Sam and Nicole show today.
Yes. And we actually saw each other in person again a couple of days ago in Chicago.
We did at the Chicago Auto Show. What'd you think of the auto show?
The amazing shrinking auto show.
I know. It felt really small.
Yeah. Well, typically the Chicago show, it's held at McCormick Place, which is an enormous convention center in Chicago. And usually it takes up two halls, the North Hall and the South Hall. But this year, with the absence of Stellantis and hence the absence of Camp Jeep, which is their big indoor test drive area that they always set up in the back part of the hall. There was a bunch of extra space available in the South Hall. So they condensed everything down to one hall and used the North Hall the day before the media previews for the concept and technology garage, which typically in the past years has been in another hall across the road.
Right.
It wasn't a bad show.
No.
And you were at the Mama breakfast on Thursday morning, right?
Yes.
You hear Jen Morand, who's the co-president of the show,
Yes.
talking about auto shows. And one of the things she talked about was, she said, talking to a group of several hundred media, it's like auto shows are not about you guys.
Right. She did.
Yeah. It's about the consumers. So when I say you guys, I'm referring to literally to us, not to you that are listening to us.
The media, like it used to be like the media days were a big deal. And doing auto shows is incredibly expensive for the automakers to pay for the space, to pay for everything. Like every last little thing that you see on the floor, like the carpet, everything is an added cost for them. And when they do these huge booths just to create, I still think the Subaru booth is one of the most just beautiful, incredible, amazing. They make it look like an outdoor setting. That is not an inexpensive proposition. So they're doing
that's multi-million dollars.
Yeah,
to set one of those up. And that's after you've considered, actually building the structures and everything. Just doing the installation at an auto show is multi-millions of dollars.
And then when you add on that, and that's all for all of us, right? The media sees it and the consumer see it. You guys get to see it when you show up at the auto show. But then when they do a big debut there for us, they charge them for every single chair they put on the floor, for crying out loud.
Trust me. I've been on the other side of that. I know how that works.
Right.
I mean, so, you're talking, $5,000 for an Ethernet drop to use for 2 days.
Yeah. So it's crazy expensive for them. And there are better ways for them to get media attention for their products. But auto shows are still a great way for consumers to come after we all leave town. And I still think it, you and I, Sam, we see cars all the time. We get new cars in our driveway. We're on these launches. We constantly see new cars. The general public doesn't. And you don't want to have to drive from your Ford dealership to your Jeep dealership to your whatever Toyota dealership and have that run around and go to each. It's a process when you go to a dealership. And by and large, no one likes it. If you walk into an auto show, they are all there. All of their cars are there. You can see every single car that you want to see all in the same space.
Almost everyone.
Almost, yeah. No longer the G. But you can see so many of the cars in the same space, and it's kind of fun, and they have fun stuff, little things you can pretend you're driving, little virtual reality kind of stuff. And it's a neat experience. So I think for consumers, auto shows are just as good as ever. The only sad part is people companies like Stellantis pulling out. That was a big deal, and that was kind of sad because the Camp Jeep thing was really cool. Now they have the Bronco thing that's same exact idea, but a Bronco instead of a Jeep. You still have that. So you can still ride around in the fancy, artificially created off-road thing that Ford has put up, and that's really cool.
Right. And they have the EV test track back where the Camp Jeep used to be,
Yeah.
where you can try out a bunch of different EVs. Like in Chicago this year, they've got, Volkswagen ID4. They have some BMW stuff. They've got some GM stuff. So there's a bunch of different things. I think the Lucid Air is there. So, if you're thinking about a Lucid Air,
Right.
you want to go for a ride in one, it's all right there in the show hall.
And that's great. Like think about it, where if you tried to go ride in a Lucid Air and two or three other EVs because you wanted to know what it was like with an EV and just wanted a quick ride in each one, that would take you your entire weekend of going from place to place to get time and to give the dealership your information and get it done. It takes forever. It would be several weekends to ride, half a dozen different vehicles because it's a pain in the butt. It's a process. You go to an auto show and they have these little test tracks. You get to ride along in one. It's like, oh, that was just half my day. And I had fun because there's also fun stuff. This one, okay, did you see? They have some fun stuff that made the Chicago Auto Show a little more like, how home shows always have random stuff, like get these sharp knives, like whatever, like random.
Mm-hmm.
There was a booth that was selling some kind of fancy hot sauce. Now these, of course, aren't open when you and I were there, but did you see there was a hot sauce booth?
I missed that one.
There was a hot sauce booth. There was also a booth for Weber grills.
I did see that.
Yeah, and they had the coolest little black jackets that had a little red Weber grill like thing. And I'm like,
I need one of those when I'm grilling on my grill.
Right? Like I'm like, we have a Weber. I want a Weber grill jacket. It was the cutest thing. But so they have some fun stuff that's like it's car show plus a little bit extra. So there's some other little fun stuff to kind of check out when you're there. And there was like, they have booths from like the state police and all sorts of different things that'll be there when the show is open. So it's kind of just neat to see all of this. So I think for media, it's not what it once was and it's changed quite a bit. But for consumers, it's still a fantastic deal.
Yeah. I mean, the first auto show I covered as media was the 2007 Detroit show. And, in those days, everybody was there. I mean, it really was the North American International Auto Show. So you had every automaker there. And, it was media previews were 2.5 days of solid morning to evening press conferences.
And it was nonstop. You literally went from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. You never stopped.
And as part of the auto blog team, we had like, I think 9 or 10 people there. And we were, in the morning before the first press conferences, we would sit down and go through the day's schedule and we would get assigned which press conferences we were going to cover. And it was like 2.5 or at least two of us at each press conference. Hi, Russ.
He just said, hi, Russ.
So, it'd be one of us to write, the other one to do photography, and then as soon as the press conference was done, get some photos, after the press scrum. Everybody rushes back to the media center, write up our story. And there's already the next pair are already in good spots at the next press conference, which would be like 10 minutes later. And,
and you had to stage your spot. Like if you wanted to have a spot to record video, like if you actually had to do video for an outlet, you had to be there like an hour before you had to miss the prior press conference.
Yes.
Because you had to be standing there, secure your spot in the stage, so you'd have your camera and you'd have a spot where you could see it. Because if you waited until 5-10 minutes before, it was completely packed with people. It's like, well, good luck. You're just gonna have to hold up your camera over everyone's heads.
Yeah. So my guess is that next January, when the Detroit show moves back to the winter schedule, and the reason why they always did it in January instead of in the warmer months is because it was originally intended as a consumer show. It was a place for people, in the depths of winter. Typically spring is when a lot of people go out and shop for cars. And so, doing it in January in Detroit, February in Chicago, people would come out. They get you, like you said, they get that chance to, kick the tires on all these different brands, sit in them, take a close look at them, learn a little more about them, and then figure out what they wanted to actually go out and test drive, in a couple of months. It
kind of lets you get it like you have 10 different cars you're trying to look at. Well, at least you can get eyeballs on all of them. You can see them, kind of get a few details, think, oh, this doesn't look the way I thought it looked when I was looking at it on my laptop, and get a better idea of what it looks like. So then you can narrow it down. So like you said, springtime comes around, you've done your research, you know what the car is, you've got some information, you've had eyeballs on it, you've taken a look at it, you kind of see whether or not you like it. Then you can go take it for a drive in the spring and really figure out which one you want to buy. And doing the winter is perfect. I mean, we used to have a car, a very small, like auto show here in New England. It happened in January because once again, no one has anything to do. It's cold. Going inside and wandering around and seeing the auto show is a fun thing to do. And then when time came around, you could go out and you could buy your car.
And my guess is come January, because the 2025 Detroit show is actually going to be starting right on top of CES, that they probably won't even bother with a media day. They'll do the industry preview day where all the engineers come out and measure everybody else's products and take notes. But I would be surprised if they even bother with a media day.
You don't think they'll do a media day at all?
No, because I don't think automakers will, I don't think they will even want to spend the money to do it, to show up. I mean, the past 2 years when they've done it in September, it's been Ford, Stellantis, and GM is the only ones. Stellantis has already said they're not doing auto shows anymore. So now you're down to Ford and GM.
And that's a huge footprint. Stellantis is not one brand. That's a lot of cars.
Right. And, the 2023 show in September, yes, all three of them participated, but there were no actual all new products. Everything, you had the Ford F-150, which was a mid-cycle refresh. You had the Jeep Gladiator mid-cycle refresh, and the Cadillac CT5 mid-cycle refresh. There was no actual new product unveiled there. There was some new product shown, but it was stuff that had actually been unveiled, a month, 2 months before at standalone events, like the new GMC Acadia and Chevy Traverse. And do you
remember when at the auto show, like really old school? Now, even sometimes when the reveal is happening, we've already gotten all this embargoed stuff, so we know what we're about to get. Do you remember when you really truly had no clue? You're like, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I remember.
There'd just be a car on the stage. You'd be like, I don't know. When they pull the silk off, we'll find out. You had no information until that instant, and then they'd send you the press kit. Like, here's your press kit. You're like, and everybody's trying to write because nobody knew anything, literally until the moment that they revealed it at the show.
Yeah, I think one of the last great, press conferences, Detroit show press conferences, was probably in 2015, January 2015. The Ford press conference, where they rolled out, and I knew what was coming only because 6 months before I had still been working in Ford Communications, and I had actually worked on some of that stuff. Yeah, but nobody else knew what was coming. So and there weren't even really many much informed speculation about it. So they started off. They brought out the second generation F-150 Raptor. Then they brought out the GT350, the Shelby GT350 with the flat plane crank V8. And then there was the one more thing, which was the Ford GT.
I remember that one.
And that one that one, I knew the GT was coming, but prior to my departure from Ford, I had not yet actually been down to the studio to see it. So I had no idea what it looked like.
So even you were surprised.
Yeah.
You know what? I remember that press conference. And I also remember, and this was funny, just like, the set, we talk about how EVs don't have sounds, and there's something about the sound of the exhaust and the sound of an engine on these cars with all this power. Ford had a huge booth, and they had almost like a little media center within their booth. Like it was tables that you could sit and work at and do stuff, and you were still like in the background of the Ford booth. Well, because they didn't tell you the GT was coming, it wasn't already there. They literally pulled it onto the show floor from that debut. And I'm sitting there working, rumble of people and whatever else. I was like, I'm like, what the heck? As they drove it on, I remember the sound of it. It's like, what? Oh, that's
put it up on the turntable in there.
Yes. And you could hear them. And it's not like they're barely driving when and there's all these people, they're moving out of the way. But I could just remember the sound of it and thinking, what in the name of it? I'm like, oh, the GT's arrived at the actual Ford booth. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, enough about that.
Yes.
Let's move on to what we're driving. What have you had this week?
So I have the Subaru Outback this week, which I feel like, I used to say if I got a really like snow-worthy car, our snowstorms were going to be nothing. And if I got a something like a Miata, it's like the 1-inch snowstorm was going to be like 5 feet. So we've had the most beautiful weather. It's been sunny. It's like in the high 50s yesterday. I went out with just a shirt and like a little tiny light spring jacket yesterday. This goes back tomorrow And on Tuesday, we're getting almost a foot of snow. I'm like, are you kidding? So if it was snowing, this would be a great little choice. Subarus are great in the snow. Everyone I've ever had, when you take a Subaru out in the snow, they're champs. They just get through it. They're not fancy, but they do the job. The Subaru Outback for 24, it's the same engine that it had before. It's a 2.4 liter with 182 horsepower, 176 pound-feet of torque. It has a CVT. Not a super fan of the CVT in Subaru. Sometimes they get a little, they get a little cranky when you accelerate hard. They're like, I don't wanna. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's not horrible. You know, once upon a time, CVTs were just heinous. Like the sound of them, which just like nails in a chalkboard. But it's not my favorite one. I do like this. The trim I had was actually, it's funny. I was getting super confused looking online, but it says this is the Touring XT. And it was weird because when I looked online at first, it was like Touring and XT, but mine literally says Touring XT. So I don't know if there was some change between this and that, but I had the Touring XT according to the full, complete, every last detail Monroney that is laminated that Subaru put in the car. Thank you, Subaru. I was so happy. I grabbed it from the car. I'm like, you are kidding me. Everything is on here. Right down to now you win because Robbie's not here. What do you think the destination and delivery is on this?
Ooh.
How about this? I say you only win if you come in within $200. You have to be plus or minus.
I'm going to say $1,295.
Holy bejesus. It's exactly $1,295.
Oh, wow.
Did you just look or did you really just guess that? Wow.
I did not. I actually have, I was trying to load the Subaru page just to check the trim levels. Yeah. And I'm getting a page unresponsive error from Chrome. So it was a complete guess on my part.
Okay, well, okay, I'll believe you. Yeah. He's like, I have no laptop for service at all right now. Yeah, because when you look on their media site, which is what I was using, it has a Touring and an XT trim. I don't know if somehow something changed or whatever, and there is a Touring XT. But either way, this is clearly top trim level. I mean, it's beautiful inside. It has these sort of chocolate brown kind of leather seats, and they're a little bit, it's got a little extra bolstering, not sports car bolstering, but keep you in place on the bumps and dips. And if you're going to take this and do a little bit of off-road stuff, if you've got something more rugged, then you kind of want that extra bolstering to hold you in as you're bouncing about. The base trim, which is literally called base, has a dual screen situation. It's a 7-inch display and then a 7-inch touchscreen. That's just on literally the very base trim. The rest of them get an 11.6-inch, I'm trying to say vertical screen that's mounted there. Portrait. Thank you. I'm like, what's that word? Portrait style screen. I like that screen. I like the 11.6 inch. It's great. I am not a fan of the 7-in-7 setup that Subaru has. And I mean, as I recall, they've had it and they've sort of gradually, it's like lower and lower trim. Now it's just the base trim. So I'd imagine at some point it'll go poof and we'll just have the big screen. But when you see it with the other screen setup, that's like the biggest drawback to getting the base trim in this. You always sacrifice something when you go with the start, the lowest trim in a lineup. But I feel like in the Subaru Outback, that's a pretty big one. Having that dual screen setup, I'm not a fan of. But this, with the 11.6 inch, I love it. And it's a nice responsive screen, very easy to see, very easy to reach. So I like this one. And the pricing, so it's $1,295 for the destination. With the destination, the total price on this one is $44,231. So it's a decent price, and you have all-wheel drive. It's capable. It has, it has that X mode, which helps you with traction and stuff when you're off-road or when you're just dealing with the snow that I'm going to get right after they take this away. And
you'll probably get a Miata.
And so there's probably a Miata due for delivery on Monday afternoon. I have no doubt, Sam, a Miata
with summer tires.
Summer performance slicks probably is what we've got on there. So this, and it's a great, you think of, I always say, Subaru, and they sell themselves this way. They are the outdoorsy, adventure-y, active lifestyle. They've got statistics about their customers and the number of them that go like kayaking and snowboarding and all these things. And people who buy Subarus really do trend way higher on all those things than, other car makers. But I think the thing about Subaru, and I find this neat, it's such a popular brand in New England. Because it's just hangs in there forever. They're durable, they're rugged, they'll handle snow, they'll handle muck, they'll handle your dog in the car, they'll handle your kids in the car. They're a good, like, I don't want something fancy pants I have to worry about, like, oh God, I got salty, my kids have snow and salt in their boots and now they just put them on the seats and the seats are ruined. No, the Subaru laughs at your children's snowy boots. It has no problem with any of that. So you don't really have, active lifestyle, 100%. But if you just want a nice, rugged, reliable, can stand up to wear and tear car, a Subaru also fits that. And I like this. It's comfy. It has a comfy back seat. It's got that nice, tailgate. So there's, or lift gate. So there's plenty of room in the cargo area. I'm a fan of Subarus. I feel like for, what did I just say, about $44,000 for this with a top trim with all the bells and whistles, like the heated seats and all that, you're not getting a premium car. It's not a Mercedes and it doesn't look like one inside, but you're getting a premium version of a Subaru and it still feels like you're like, okay, I don't feel like I'm on the base trim. Got a nice infotainment, have these features. It's comfy. It's all these things. It looks like a nice car inside and out. So I am a fan of the Outback and I thoroughly enjoyed having it this weekend. Wish that I had it still for one more day for Tuesday, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And I like the size of the Outback, especially if you got a young family. It's a good size. It's a mid-size wagon that happens to ride a little bit higher. It's roughly the same size. When our kids were young, we had a VW Passat station wagon.
Yeah.
And one of the cars that was in the running at the time was that we took a look at, that my wife test drove, was the Outback. And this was 20 years ago, and she was not a fan of the CVT at that time. And so
it's better now than it was, but
especially
once upon a time it was not good.
Right. And so, we ultimately went with the Passat, which probably ended up costing us way more, just in repairs over the years, but that's a whole other issue that I think I've discussed at various points in the past, but it was a great car to drive. But, that size of car, I think is really good. And the utility you get, from that wagon form factor, you've got the hatch, when you need extra cargo space, you can put a shocking amount of stuff in the back of the wagon. And you'd be amazed how much stuff you can cram in there. And even with the seats up, when you're using them, to carry passengers, you still get a good amount of space back there, much more than you get in a sedan, and frankly, as much or more than you get in a typical, crossover of similar footprint.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's part of that. Really is a lot of the appeal with this, because there's a lot of room, and I don't have the number in front of me, but there's a lot of space behind those rear seats. It is a large cargo area. When you see it, after having looked at so many vehicles like we have, Sam, you're kind of like, well, this is from the outside, you don't expect this. You expect it's going to be less, but there's a lot of room back there. So you can have a full load. You can have your family in there and you can pack it full of a good amount of stuff. If you're going camping or you've got luggage for like a week's vacation, it is zero problem to fit that kind of equipment into the back of this vehicle. That's a huge part of its versatility. And I love that it does that without being huge. Like when your kids when you have a family and you need a little bit more cargo room, you need a little bit more of everything, but you genuinely don't want a big SUV because they're more expensive. They're harder to park. Their fuel economy is, there's a million reasons to get one. There's a million reasons not to. And if you want just like, I need more room, but I don't want big SUV, something like the Outback is just absolutely perfectly proportioned to deliver that for a family that wants that extra bit, but does not need truly an SUV.
Yep. All right. Well, I had something just ever so slightly larger.
Just a tad.
Just a tad, yes. I had 2024 Ford F-250 XL. So this is kind of the baseline of the Super Duty lineup. So the 250, excuse me, is the entry level point to, and for Super Duties, it runs all the way up to like F550s and F600s, which are class 5, class 6 medium duty vehicles that, the 550s and 600s, typically are built as chassis cabs and they get sent to an upfitter to put, bucket lifts on there for utilities, and they'd get turned into ambulances and tow trucks. And actually my neighbor across the street just bought an F550 chassis cab that he's driving out to Colorado next month to get a flatbed and a camper put on it, turning it into transforming it into an overlanding rig.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah. The 250 is the entry point of that, which does not mean that it lacks for capability. It still has, it's obviously not as much as you can do with a 550 or 600, but it has a lot of capability. And it's really, this is the XL is the work truck. You can also get these in, Lariat and platinum trims, the fancy pants. This ain't that. This is not fancy. So the one that I have is a crew cab with the 6 3/4 foot beds. You can also get this with an 8-foot bed. And it has the just the plain black plastic grille, black, flat, black painted bumpers front and rear. And then this one also, I specifically requested this one, because I wanted to try out the new 6.8 liter V8. So we've had Ford's had the 7.3 liter quote unquote Godzilla engine V8 for the last several years. And the 6.8 is basically a slightly downsized version of that. Still has a tremendous amount of power. I think it's like 370 horsepower or something like that. And I wanted to try it out, see how that one feels. And that 6.8, at least for an F250, has plenty of power. There is no shortage of horsepower and torque in this thing. I mean, this thing will get up and go. The one that I had also has the XL off-road package.
Does that make it all? How much is that? Is the price on there, or did I put you on the spot?
Yes. Let me find it here. The XL off-road package is $995.
Okay.
So that gives it, a bit of a lift. Like it's a 1 or 2 inch lift, 33-inch all-terrain tires. So you could actually do some pretty decent off-roading with this thing. It's got a two-speed transfer case. So you got 4-wheel drive high, 4-wheel drive low, in addition to 2-wheel drive. Aside, the biggest downside for off-roading, is just the length of it. So your breakover angle is going to be somewhat limited. But the front overhang's fairly short. And you can remove the front air dam. There's this deep front air dam to help with aerodynamics. You can actually take that off so you get a little better approach angle if you wanted to.
Do they make it something that's like easy to take off?
It's fairly straightforward to take off.
It is pretty, so you could like take it off and then pop it back on. It wouldn't be something that you'd be struggling with for. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. The one that I have also has the lowest final drive ratio, so it's a 4.30 to 1 final drive ratio. And I'll get to why that's important. I mean, it's important for a couple of things. One, if you're going to be towing with this thing, then it's great for that. It helps boost, multiply the amount of torque that you've got available. Downside of that, not great for fuel economy.
So tell us what kind of fuel economy you did get in this thing, Sam.
So I took it out for a run around my usual fuel economy loop the other day, and got 13 miles per gallon in mixed highway, urban, suburban.
Hey, it was double
driving.
Digits. I feel like
I did break into double digits, so that's good.
It could have been single digits, so
that's true
for 13.
Yeah. If you need better fuel economy and you don't necessarily need maximum towing capability, then you can get like a 3.3 rear axle ratio. The 430 axle does come with an electronic locking differential. So when you're doing your off-roading, you can press the button, lock that rear diff, get some extra traction in those conditions. So that is helpful. I also had the greater than 10,000 pound GVWR package, which is only $100, which is it's a pretty good bargain there. The driver assist package for $730. One accessory that I was surprised to find on here, the 12,000 pound Ford Performance Parts Warn winch for $3,855. So if the way thinking about this truck, this is a pretty plain Jane truck, all hard plastics inside. It's fine. Vinyl seats, fine.
Mhm.
Rubber floor mats, so easy to clean out. This truly is a work truck.
Right. It's not the
And
fancy truck. It's the get stuff done truck.
right. So this is the kind of truck, and with the 4x4 off-road package, this is the kind of truck you're probably going to use on a farm. So
Right.
this is a farm truck, it's perfect for that.
Mhm.
It doesn't have any running boards or rock rails or anything like that. Which given the lift that it has on it and the 33-inch tires means that, you're probably, unless you are about as tall as Robbie, you're probably going to be reaching up and grabbing that grab handle on the A-pillar to help boost yourself up into the truck. Because it's a pretty tall step up to get into the cab. But as with all other F-Series, frankly, all full-size pickups with a crew cab, I mean, this thing is really roomy inside. The back seat is like a limo. And the front seat in this one, it's got a column shift. The front seat is actually a bench. The center section of it folds down, so you have an armrest, and there's a work table. So it's not quite like the work surface that you have in the F-150s, and that's available even in the Super Duties. But it's it's a work surface that kind of slides forward a little bit and then swivels towards the driver, so you can have a laptop or a tablet on there, or use it for your lunch when you're having lunch in the truck.
Right.
And if you do need to carry 6 people, five passengers, you can just fold that whole thing up, and you could have 3 across comfortably in one of these things. So it is roomy, for 6 people. Like I said, the 6.8, it's got plenty of power. This one also had the tailgate step option in there, which is very handy, again, because it's so tall. If you need to get up into the tailgate, you drop the tailgate, pull that step out. You got a handle there, so you can step up. But all the Super Duties also have now this year have a bumper step in the rear corners, and then the bedside step just ahead of the rear wheels. So if you need to reach in to grab something out of the bed, you can just step up on one of these, and you can get easier access to the bed, because otherwise, if you're standing on the ground, again, unless you're very, very tall, you're going to have a hard time reaching anything in the bed.
Yeah, it's really high. I've stood next to those and I feel like a little midget. It's like, there's no chance I'm reaching in there.
And with that winch, you also get a couple of required options, which includes a 410 amp dual alternator setup. So you get 2 alternators on the engine, and also dual batteries. So you have enough power for that 12,000 pound winch, as well as it's also got 2 kilowatt pro power on board. So there's a couple of 120 volt outlets in the bed. So you can plug in some tools and run those off there, charge your equipment, things like that. What else we got here? There's a bed liner, and a couple of skid plates that are for the transfer case and the fuel tank, that are part of that 4x4 the XL off-road package. So all in, grand total for this, $62,080.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot for an XL work truck. But
it's crazy, but it's not. Like, you just look at the number, but then when you look at what you're getting and what you're going to be doing with it,
yeah,
actually not.
I mean, this is not something I would ever recommend to anybody to use as a just a daily driver.
Yeah.
In fact, I would strongly recommend against it. Visibility out of it is especially, any of the full size trucks, especially the heavy duties, visibility directly in front of you tends to be fairly limited when you're driving. So if there are, young kids, or, anybody shorter, that might be in your vicinity, it's not great for that. And that is a real issue.
That's the big problem with any large trucks or large SUVs, that the way because the hoods are so big, and because the way they're designed, I remember having a colleague who's maybe, I don't know, probably about my height, maybe a little taller, walk really close to, but in front of, and it was like, man, I could see like his forehead. Like, it's anybody who's short, or kids especially, it's going to be completely hidden. So if you do have kiddos around, you have to be super, super careful pay attention or anything low because you just can't see it when they're up close.
Yeah, and this one fortunately did come with the 360-degree camera package. So you got a whole bunch of cameras all around, and you can tap on the screen and get different views. So you can see what's directly in front of you, what's directly behind you. You can get the especially for off-roading, you can get the views along the front fenders. So you can see exactly where your wheels are. If you're going down a trail, things like that. That is unfortunately that package $1,150. But it's definitely something that you might want to consider for a truck like this. Baseline, XL, two-wheel drive XL F-250 starts at about $45,000, which is not cheap, but it's a lot more affordable.
Less. Yeah, that's a chunk.
But if you need something to do the work, that's what Super Duties and the Ram and GM heavy duty trucks are for. They're work trucks.
They're genuinely like if you want a truck, but it's kind of like lifestyle-ish, or if you're just hauling stuff to the dump or occasionally bringing equipment or something around for fun, regular truck. If you actually are doing work, that's when you need things like the F-250.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to take a guess at the delivery charge?
You did so
good. Got to be within the $200 again.
I'm never going to match you. I'm just going to say $1,295 just to do it.
$19.95.
Dang it! My other instinct was 14, so I still would have been off.
Yeah, and this one has 3,270 pound payload capability. So it's got some serious payload capability. You can haul a lot of stuff in it.
Yeah. So I mean, they're great. They're expensive, but they are absolutely perfect for doing what you need to get done. There's a huge percentage of people that need to have something that's capable enough of getting the work done, that actually can go out in a ranch or go out in the dirt and can haul stuff around in construction sites, that kind of stuff. And that's who these trucks are for, and they do the job beautifully.
Oh, and there's an actual key, like a switchblade key that you actually have to insert and turn and twist to start it.
A real key thing, like
an actual metal bladed key.
You poke into the door and it opens.
Yep.
Who knew?
Well, you can unlock the doors by pressing the button on there, but to actually start the engine, you do have to insert the key and twist it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so old school. Like the number of cars that actually do that is so few anymore.
I know. But a lot of these base level trucks still do that.
Smartphones have gotten way more expensive over the past decade, and all it takes is one impact on a hard floor to make you wish you had spent a few bucks to put a case on it. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone, and it only costs a few dollars a month. Nicole, Robbie, and I travel a lot for our work, and we spend a lot of time in hotels, coffee shops, airplanes, and of course the Delta Sky Club. Connecting to the Wi-Fi in any public places with shared Wi-Fi puts your data at risk because bad actors could be intercepting what you send and using it to steal from you. It only takes some cheap hardware to intercept Wi-Fi data, and even a smart preteen can do it. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per victim selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops the bad guys by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN uses state-of-the-art encryption that would take a supercomputer up to 1 billion years to crack. I have ExpressVPN on all my devices, including a MacBook Pro, Windows laptops and desktops, and Android and iOS phones and laptops, or tablets. When I want to be secure, I just launch the app, click once to connect, and my data is secure. As I said, I travel a lot for my work, and I have to connect to countless public Wi-Fi networks in many countries. I have ExpressVPN on all my connected devices so that whoever else is on the same network can't see any of my data. That's important because I often have to check banks, credit card accounts, and transmit client data that might be sensitive, as well as filing articles on news that might be under embargo. ExpressVPN protects all of it, and I've been paying for my own account for years. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. That's expressvpn.com/wheelbearings, and you can get an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/wheelbearings.
So, did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly?
Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia. We've updated the Wheel Bearings merch store, and now there's a whole bunch of new choices, new colors, new styles, t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, hats, mugs, travel mugs, stickers, aprons, tote bags, you name it. You can get your Wheel Bearings merch at shop.wheelbearings.media. Go check it out. That's shop.wheelbearings.media.
All right. Let's move on. So you've been to Paris, haven't you?
I have.
So, parking in cities like Paris and, a lot of other big cities, especially older cities, can be a real pain.
Can be miserable. Let's be honest.
And it's about to get a lot more painful for anybody driving large or very heavy vehicles in Paris, into central Paris in the very near future. They recently had a referendum in there. And they passed, one of the things that they passed was to triple the parking rates for heavy, bulky, and polluting cars, including many electric and plug-in hybrid models.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Wait.
So
I'm reading the details of this. I'm like, wait.
So if you have a vehicle that weighs more than 3,500 pounds or 1,600 kilos, and there's also some size limitations as well, you will need to pay more. You'll need to pay, 18 euros an hour in central Paris and 12 euros per hour in surrounding areas. So about $19 and $13.
I love the exemptions. So if you live in Paris, you're exempt. If you have a valid permit, also taxi drivers, health workers, handicapped drivers, entrepreneurs. So you're fine. you're inventing stuff. Drive your big SUV. That's a weird one.
Yeah. So Elon can park his Cybertruck in central
he's
Paris.
An entrepreneur, right? So he's what counts? How do you prove that one? I just imagine
that is a strange one.
I'm imagining the paperwork.
Yeah. Well, in France, there's probably going to be a lot of paperwork for that.
No matter which one it is. Yes.
Yeah. So they estimate that roughly 10% of the vehicles that park in Paris are going to be over the weight limit. And actually, the weight limit, if it's an electric vehicle, it does have a higher weight limit. It's 4,400 pounds because they are inherently more heavy.
Right.
More heavy. They are inherently heavier than internal combustion. But it's still a relatively low weight limit for EVs as well.
This story on Autoblog lists some of the vehicles that'll be considered overweight: the Model Y, the Volkswagen ID4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about 4,500 pounds, 4,600 pounds.
The BMW X5, the Mercedes GLC, and then big SUVs and big sedans like the S-Class. But I'm like, the ID4, it doesn't feel like a giant vehicle to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, to us, it doesn't. But by European standards, when you consider, the smaller cars that many people in Europe drive, it is actually on the larger side.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, you're right. In a European world, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's like, gosh, and they already have, do they still do the things where they have days where they don't, like you can't drive in Paris because they have such pollution issues. There are all sorts of restrictions.
I think they do. And one of the things that a lot of European cities are starting to do is implement eco zones in central urban areas. And for example, BMW and some other manufacturers now on their plug-in hybrids, they have geofencing. So if you put into the navigation, you're going into the central part of the city, what it will do is it will, and it knows, the car knows what your state of charge is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're driving from outside the city into the central portion of the city into one of these E-zones, then it will save your battery power till you get to the edge of that E-zone and then automatically switch over to running on battery. Or, if your battery power is low, then it will it will actually run the engine when you're outside of the zone to charge up the battery. And this is
Right.
something that Jeep has in their 4xe models as well. There's that the charging mode where
Right.
it will run the engine and charge the battery up while you're driving, so that when you get to the perimeter of one of these zones, then it can switch over automatically.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Smart cars are getting so smart.
Yeah. Maybe too smart, but
Maybe too smart,
we'll
some
get
might
to that.
say.
Yeah. So speaking of VW, you mentioned the ID4.
Yes.
The ID4 is also built in Chattanooga, Tennessee, at Volkswagen's plant there. And in the last 60 days, more than half of the employees there have signed up to join the UAW. This is in the wake of the huge contract that the UAW scored with the Detroit automakers last fall. And one of the reasons why union president Sean Fain fought so hard for those contracts is because they want to start going to the other non-unionized auto plants and get them unionized so that they're getting paid more as well.
Yeah.
And so they're starting off with Volkswagen, and they've already got more than half of workers there signed up to be represented by the union. And what the union has said is, they're going to target, trying to get to 70% before they officially file for a union vote to get the plant organized with the UAW and then start negotiating with Volkswagen for a contract. Did you go to the economic club luncheon on Thursday?
I did not. I was not able to attend. Did you attend that?
I did. And the guest speaker this year was Pablo Deci, who's the president of Volkswagen Group of America. Phil LeBeau from CNBC was moderating it. He asked him about the union.
What did he say?
And Deci said, we talk to our employees. We want to let them know we want to work with them. But Volkswagen as a company is also used to working with unions. We're not opposed to them. And in fact, in Germany, something that's part of the law in Germany is, they companies with unions have what's known as a works council. And the half of the seats on a company supervisory board, which is the equivalent of a board of directors here, are allocated to labor representation. So can you imagine half of the seats on the board of directors of General Motors or Ford or
no,
Tesla?
I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine that at all.
Being held by the UAW.
Yeah, that would be oh my gosh, no.
So he said, we'll work with the union if it comes to that. We want to do right by our employees. So, he said the right things. We'll see what happens if it comes to that.
The thing is, it's like he's got to say the right things. He's got to say like, oh, well, we're ready to work with our employees and we want to keep them happy. And, if we're ready for whatever comes our way because we value our employees. But, he can't even, I'm not saying that that's not honest how he feels, but he also can't say, crap, they're unionizing, we don't want to deal with it. It's like he can't say that, even if that's what they're thinking.
There's only one CEO in the industry that will say that out loud.
Would be Elon Musk.
Yes.
Yeah, Elon, that's it. He's the only one who'll say that.
Pretty much.
Yeah, there's no way that Volkswagen is going to say it. And I'm not saying that that's what he was thinking behind the scenes, but he towed a party line very nicely there, which is kind of what he has to do especially if they're about on the cusp of actually unionizing. If they're at about 50 and they want to get to 75, they don't have a huge way to go. So,
yep. Did you happen to catch the Ford earnings call last week?
I did not catch the call myself, but I heard some interesting things about it.
Yeah. So I guess on the call, Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, revealed that about 2 years ago, he set up a skunkworks team at Ford to focus on developing affordable EVs. And we've talked about EV affordability a lot here, and or the absence of it. Certainly, Tesla has talked about introducing a $25,000 EV for better part of a decade,
Right.
and someday it might even happen. but Ford has specifically said, that they're focusing. They've got this team that is focused on how they can profitably build sub $30,000 EVs.
And I mean, it's weird because I get it. Like the way the entire industry, not just Ford, is going with EVs has been a little bit like stutter, start, stop. Like they can't quite figure out the right mix. They can't quite figure out how much we need to make, what we need to make, what people are looking for, because it's not like we've had EVs before and they have this grand history of how this whole process is going to work. So it's a little bit of a shot in the dark. I do think cost prohibits a lot of people from getting some of these EVs. You have these very, very fancy, very, very expensive electric vehicles on some fronts. And that's hard for a lot of people. Most people aren't looking for luxury cars. They're looking for affordable cars. And if you want to make it really, truly reachable for everybody, you've got to bring the prices down. So doing that is a great idea. But I still can't help but wonder the going concerns about EVs. That doesn't change that our infrastructure is lacking, and depending on where you live, lacking more than others in terms of availability of chargers and even availability of being able to charge at your own home, and then just having them working. And I think until we fix that, or I don't even want to say it's broken, until everybody gets up to speed with that, until the companies that make chargers and everybody kind of gets into a system with this where you can reliably, without having to think about it, go up, plug in and charge and walk away or drive away. It's going to be hard even if you have a really affordable electric vehicle, because people are still a little bit leery of being able to charge it reliably when they're out and about.
Yeah. And, speaking of that, just yesterday, or no, day before on Friday, there was an announcement. Last summer, we got an announcement from 7 automakers that they were forming a joint venture to build a DC fast charging network, 30,000 chargers by the end of the decade. And that includes BMW, GM, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, Mercedes-Benz, trying to think who else. But that was announced in June or July of last year. They announced on Friday that company has now received regulatory approval. It's going to be called Iona.
Iona, like Iona.
Ionna, 2 N's.
Oh, Ionna.
Yeah.
Iona.
And they named their CEO as Seth Cutler, who formerly was in charge of technology at a company called EV Connect, which was recently purchased by Schneider Electric. EV Connect does a lot of back-end services for charging, so authentication, payment systems for EV charging networks, so he's got experience in the charging space, and so Iona plans to have their first stations online before the end of this year, and like I said, 30,000 DC chargers online by the end of the decade. So. They're clearly trying to compete with Tesla and the superchargers. They haven't said anything yet about support for NECS, but presumably they will be including that as well, since all of the companies that are actually partners in it will be building cars with NECS connectors.
And I think that's almost like that kind of thing. Not that you can stop developing new cars. You're always developing, and cars take a long time to go from an idea in your head to an actually drivable thing. But I think that if they could get the charging network in the United States up to snuff, a lot more people would be willing to look at an electric vehicle. I know people who would right now, people who be, and it's not even an affordability thing. It's just, I don't want one if I don't know that I can reliably pull off the highway, find some place to charge, plug in and charge it in the time frame that I expect to based on my car's parameters. If I either can't plug in because it's broken or it's charging ridiculously slow, that's not reliable. That's not acceptable. They would pay the money for a more expensive one if they knew that they could always charge it. So I think that's really super important to develop those networks. I think that's more key than developing affordable vehicles, honestly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially as the EVs, increasingly start filtering into the used car market, because many of those people that are in the used car market live in situations where they will not be able to charge off street at home.
Right.
They either live in an apartment or townhouse or something, or they may live in an older urban neighborhood where you park curbside.
And the irony of that is the areas where an EV is just ideal. Urban environments where you're driving, you've short distances. You don't even need to drive tons of miles in a day. But if you can't come home and charge because you're in an apartment or something, that makes it, or then you've got to go someplace to charge. Like it's all comes down to the charging thing again. It'd be great to have that in more urban environments, but that's where it's the hardest for people to sometimes find someplace to actually charge their vehicles.
Right. And that's where, we really have to also, in addition to the DC chargers, we need a lot more focus on curbside AC charging or AC charging, in places where people are actually parking, because that's way more cost effective, way more economical. And, the vehicles are still sitting around long enough, every day to be charged fully and be fully charged every day. So I think that's going to be a key factor that needs to be addressed this decade.
I agree. I think you're right.
All right. So last June, you and I went for a ride in a couple of Cruise robotaxis in Austin.
What an adventure.
How trusting are you of self-driving car technology?
I don't necessarily think it's going to kill me, but I don't necessarily think it's going to get me there when I want to get there. I feel like it's just not. Our self-driving car was very cautious.
Yes.
It was overly cautious. It's like, oh my God, other cars are here. Let me stop. Like, wait, dude. It's like, what it was like when you're in traffic and somebody in front of you won't pull the trigger and like drive into traffic. It's like, it's too congested. You have to edge your nose out there and you got to go into traffic. They'll stop. You gotta be a little bit aggressive. Self-driving car's like, no. It just sits there. Like, I'm never going to get anywhere.
I'm gonna wait.
You're going to wait. So I felt like it would get me where I needed to go, but I didn't have faith it would get me there. Like, it was normally a 10-minute drive, could be 20 in the self-driving car that picks its own weird route and will yield for everything. Yeah. That was not ideal.
Or just generally take weird routes, which is we also experienced.
Yeah, it was like, this is a lovely neighborhood. Why are we here?
Well, Forbes Legal did a survey of 2,000 Americans in early January, and they found that of the respondents, only 12% were very trusting of self-driving car technology. 22% were somewhat trusting. 25% were very untrusting. Another 21% were somewhat untrusting, and 20% were neither trusting or that they had no opinion. And that's declining. The numbers are getting worse.
I'm not surprised. So, it was before COVID, so it has to be at least 5-6 years ago. The New England Motor Press Association has used to do a thing at MIT where they do these awards and talk about tech. It was like a really neat day, and we'd always have someone from the MIT. I think is it called the Technology Lab? They have a lab that kind of works on this stuff. They had an expert from that lab, a guy with huge brain, comes and talks.
Brian Reamer.
It was a while. It was like 6 years ago. I can't remember. It may have been Brian.
It was probably Brian. Yeah.
He was fabulous because he told some great stories. It was really fun, and he made technical stuff very relatable, which I think is a hard thing to do. And he's clearly very smart, and it could have been dry, and it wasn't. And one of the things he talked about back then, now let's say 6 years ago, right? 5-6 years ago, where self-driving technology in any car was even far less than it is today. Any driver assistance, put in air quotes, anything that let your car do the driving for you. And he had this graph where it showed initially what people's acceptance of the idea of self-driving cars. And initially it was like, okay, say it starts in an average and kind of like going up, up, up. People are getting more accepting. Then all these automakers introduce stuff and they don't work the way you think. None of it works the way you think. Something as simple as lane keep assist doesn't work the way you think. That's all a part of the self-driving thing. It has to be able to keep you in your lane to someday drive you. Once all those things started not living up to expectations, that number, it was just coming down. The number of people willing to try a car, how much people trusted it. And this was like 6+ years ago. And he had said at the time, he said, what the study kind of said was by looking at those numbers, what that tells you is by automakers introducing stuff too early, by not having, even if it worked, it didn't work nicely. It didn't work in a way that was super intuitive and making it trustworthy for the consumer, actually hurt them because people are like, nope, don't trust this stuff. Don't trust it. Don't trust it. So I'm not surprised to see this because this was 6 years ago where he was saying people are not trusting it because the little tiny features, not even full self-driving like a Blue Cruise or a Super Cruise or any of that, all those little self-driver assist features were not working well enough for people to trust it. So their overall trust of self-driving tech, forget it. It was just declining. So I'm not surprised that people are still like, yeah, so now we have more technical stuff and we trust it less.
Yeah. It's, another question that they asked was, in light of recent recalls, how confident are you in the safety and reliability of Tesla's self-driving technology? 62% said not confident at all or not very confident. Only 13% said very confident.
Yeah.
And so at least, I think certainly in that case, I think that's probably a step in the right direction. I have never been particularly confident in what they're doing. So
I feel like I am not anti self-driving technologies, anti-driver assistance technologies. They can be really helpful, but really when you drive them, even the ones that are really good, like I would say Super Cruise is probably my favorite. I just find it the most intuitive and the most natural. It's the most human-like in how it drives you at the moment. But even that, you still know it's not a human driving the car. Do you know what I mean? If you're a passenger, you're not like you're nervous, but you still know this is not how a person would do this. This is not how a person would do this. That's hard to overcome. And the less, like, Super Cruise does it really well. I like how they do it. Blue Cruise doesn't do it as well. Tesla doesn't even do it as, everybody, but none of it is really, really solid. So I think it has to get to a point where it just, not only does it work, but it feels like a human driving the car when you're either the driver or the passenger. Like when passengers like, whoa, it's not just the driver who feels that it's a little off.
Yeah. And the industry, I think, I have, I believe that there's huge potential benefits from this technology, in terms of making it easier for people to get around, making improving road safety. But we have to prove that the technology that we're implementing is actually safe and reliable, and the industry has to build trust. And, if they take shortcuts, people will not trust it. And this is what happened with Cruise. Cruise took too many shortcuts. And, I can fully understand why people are losing trust in the technology when they see companies like Cruise, like Tesla, like Uber in the past, take shortcuts. Then it reduces the potential for trust, and it's a lot easier to lose trust than to build trust. It's a lot. It's a lot harder to build that trust.
If they had just held some of this stuff and not launched it as quickly as they did, and I know there's so much money involved in this, and it's there's a lot happening with this. But it's like, okay, guys, but in the end, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Like, just hold until the tech is a little bit better. Even if it works well enough, make it work really well before you hand it to people. And then people are more willing to trust you, because it's hard to get their trust back once they give it to you and then it doesn't meet their expectations. The next time you go, no, we fixed it. Did you? Did you really? That trust is gone. It's hard. And this isn't like, some easy little fly-by-night thing. It's not just like, it's a life impact. You can get killed if this kind of technology doesn't work right. I'm not saying it's killing everybody. I don't want to be knocking it like that, but it is technology that can make or break you in an accident or driving. It needs to work, or things go wrong and people get hurt. So that fear is a lot, and it is somewhat, I feel like it's justified.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the types of, very limited self-driving capability that is in a lot of vehicles today is active park assist systems, where, you can press a button and the car will automatically parallel park itself or perpendicular park itself. How do you feel about these systems? Have you played around with them at all?
Okay, so I played around with them and I'm not a fan. And the reason I'm not a fan is kind of talking about that, what we're talking about with the self-driving car stuff in general. It does a great job. Like, I found that these work. I've never had one bonk into another car or sideswipe anyone. I did have one once very many years ago get confused about seeing a motorcycle in a spot and wanted to back into the spot and there was a motorcycle in it. But that was like a one-off. But they're slow. Like where you really want parallel parking to work.
Very slow.
You're in a busy street. You're going to parallel park. You had best parallel park that car in 2 seconds flat, or the entire city is laying on the horn honking at you. When you have the self-driving car, it's like, it makes a brand new driver look speedy. It is so slow. And for that, I sit there and I'm like, I'm working on it. It's like, oh my God, everybody here is cursing at me. Everybody here is saying nasty things to me and the cars around me because I'm holding up the entire road. So it's too slow. It's too slow. What do you think? Do you think
I 100% agree with you. I mean, every time, whenever I get a car that's got one of these systems in there, I try to take it to a parking lot somewhere, and I look for a spot where hopefully there's no, there's not going to be anybody waiting for me to try it out. And inevitably, these things are so slow that even when I start off with nobody behind me, I end up with somebody behind me waiting while this thing is slowly maneuvering its way into a parking space. And it's like, oh man, it's just such a pain in the neck.
You're like
so
waiting forever. It's not.
And then
good.
I just don't bother. So Ford is apparently planning to delete their active park assist system that they have in many of their vehicles, probably most of their vehicles at this point, because the data that they're getting from the connectivity systems in the vehicle, one of the advantages for an automaker of having connectivity in the vehicle is they can get information about what features customers are actually using versus what they're not using, how often they use it, and that can help in their product planning and product development going forward. And what Ford has found is that basically nobody uses the active park assist, even though it's included in many of these cars. So they're going to eliminate it and save about $60 per car.
There you go. And if you're putting the tech in there and no one wants it, why are you putting the tech in there?
Exactly.
So yeah, I get that. I feel like people aren't gonna like this headline on the drive. You guys weren't using it, so Ford isn't gonna waste money on it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you know what? I there's something I actually really love about this because of all the. I feel this way sometimes about infotainment systems and all the stuff that they put into an infotainment system. Right? There are 900 apps and features and this and that. How many do we all really use? You know what I mean? There's so much in there that almost makes it more complex than it needs to be. I love to see them say, you guys, clearly you don't want this. Let's just get rid of it. So it's not something there. I love the idea of doing that. Like, let's get rid of the stuff that one guy is using of the thousands of cars that you sell. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, no, I think, that is, one of the ways that they absolutely should be taking advantage of the data that they're getting from our vehicles is to make smarter decisions about what features to put in cars and what to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So going back to the Chicago Auto Show.
Yes.
There was only one automaker that actually had a formal press conference this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Kia.
Yeah.
And they showed off a couple of refreshed versions of a couple of their vehicles.
Yes.
The Carnival or the Carnival.
Carnival.
And the K5, their midsize sedan.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of these updates?
I mean, it was okay. First of all, it was so nice to have one reveal at the auto show. It was like, woohoo! They actually did something. I think they're good updates. I think they've taken cars. I already loved the I can't even say Carnival, and they do say Carnival, don't they?
No, I think they say Carnival.
Do they say Carnival?
Yeah, I think it's people like us that
say
joke
Carnival.
around and say Carnival.
Okay, and they made now you have a hybrid, so you have a choice, right? They still have the gas, right? It's a gas or hybrid now with a Carnival.
Yeah, so you get the V6 or the 1.6 liter turbo hybrid.
I couldn't remember if they were just like, forget it, no gas, but it is an either or. I think that's great. I think giving them that hybrid option, that's a big deal. I think that's nice and people like that. And I like the Carnival already. I thought it was a really solid minivan and multi-purpose vehicle. Sorry, I had to look at I'm like MPV, multi-purpose vehicle minivan. I've already liked it. I already thought it was good. But I'm a fan of Kia's vehicles, and I think they do a fantastic job of making vehicles for families, like the EV9. Things that are very family friendly features, great style, great versatility, and I think this just makes the Carnival even more appealing. And people who would have walked away from it because it doesn't have a hybrid, guess what? Now you do.
Yeah, and now it's got a front fascia that looks more like a lot of the latest Kias, like particularly the refreshed Telluride that came out last year, and some of the other models. Um, I'll be really curious to try out the hybrid in this one.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised when I saw that they were putting the same hybrid in the Carnival that is in some of their other models, like the Sportage and much considerably smaller vehicles. So it's the 1.6 liter turbo with a 6-speed automatic and a 54 kilowatt electric motor for the hybrid. So it's only 242 horsepower and 271 foot-pounds of torque.
You think it's not going to have enough oomph for such a large vehicle?
Maybe it'll be interesting. Like I say, I don't know. I think it could be kind of a limiting factor for this one.
Okay. Do you think it would be enough though that someone who is looking for the improved fuel economy going with a hybrid would say not enough oomph for me? I'm gonna bail and go with a gas engine.
Maybe.
Yeah?
But then again, the current generation Toyota Sienna has similar performance. It's only available as a hybrid. They don't even offer an internal combustion engine on just a pure internal combustion engine on the Sienna anymore. And it also, it uses their 2.5 liter 4-cylinder hybrid system, and it's in the same ballpark in terms of performance. And that one has their eCVT hybrid system, whereas this has traditional automatic transmission. So this might actually feel better than the Toyota system. It might not be bad. It could be okay. We'll have to see once we get a chance to drive it.
I'm sure we will all soon get a chance to give it a go.
And what do you think about the updates to the K5?
I guess yay. They gave it a new engine. It has a little bit more horsepower. Was it 11 more horsepower?
Yeah.
Added some little updated tech and some design updates. That's great. I think it'll be, it's nice for this vehicle, but I don't think this is as big a deal for them as the Carnival.
I like the revised lighting, especially on the front end of that kind of lightning bolt thing they get going with the driving lamps. It
looks like a lightning bolt on this one too.
Yeah.
Like very, very, very much looks like a lightning bolt. It makes me think of Flash. Now I have that Flash Gordon song that'll open that Flash. Do you remember that song from the movie?
Yep.
That's in my head now.
Queen.
Now it's in yours. You're welcome, everyone.
Yeah. And the GT gets 19-inch wheels and those bright green brake calipers that were on the one that was on the show stand.
Brake calipers. They put that on that's a thing now with Kia.
Yeah.
I think that's fun. I love brake calipers that are different color. I think it can make the most boring cars suddenly like, ooh, that's cool.
Yeah. Okay. So another thing that both of us saw for the first time at the Chicago Auto Show. It's first time we've seen it in person. We've seen photos of it for a long time.
Yes, we have.
We've now had a chance to see, sit in, feel the Tesla Cybertruck.
Yes.
What did you think?
You hate it. Guys, if you could see his face, if you could just see Sam's face right now, he's like, I know I'm in the minority and I know people hate the Cybertruck. I don't hate it. Would I buy it? Nope. But there's a lot of things that I would or would not buy. I think it's really weird. I don't think it's a truck. It's not going to replace your F-150 Lightning, I guess. It's not. I don't think it replaces. I think it's a truck for someone who like the Hummer EVs. That giant things that are not really. You think of trucks as being trucky. These are not trucks for all the truck reasons. They're trucks for just I want this big weird thing, I guess. And I feel like the Cybertruck goes into I want this big weird thing, and It has. I thought the way the cover, which you have a note here that there was, the tonneau cover retracts. It is kind of neat. It sounds cool. It's like click, 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 click. It's very, very sturdy sounding, like it is sealing it in from a nuclear war. And I thought it was. I thought the interior is that typical, very bland Tesla interior. They don't do
minimalist.
They didn't do minimalist interiors, and it's like that. So no surprise there. I thought it looked a little different in person. In that it seemed to me in pictures longer than it looked when I actually saw it in person. And I had never looked at the exact measurements, but it seemed shorter when I saw it.
It's actually smaller than an F-150. It's about 7 inches shorter than an F-150.
And I think when I'd seen it in photos, it had always looked F-150 size to me. And then when I saw it in person, I thought, oh no, it's not. It's actually a little shorter than that.
Well, the original one that they showed in 2019 was larger.
Oh, was it? Maybe that's what I've seen too much of that one.
They made it small during the development process. They decided to make it smaller. So it shrunk by, I think, almost a foot in length compared to the original one.
Well, you can see it. You can really see it when you get up there. But so it was cool to see it in person. It was neat to actually see it and to touch the metal and see what it, just to see it. I don't like it more or less than I did before. I think it's a very specific person who's going to want this. And if it makes you happy, it's not like you're going to be doing trucky things in this necessarily. I think you're buying it for the fun and the novelty, and it's not cheap. So you got to have some cash to burn. And that's why you're buying this. And if that's why you're buying it, then buy it. Yeah. And you hate it. You hate it with every fiber of your heart, your soul.
Yeah. I mean, aesthetics aside, and, everybody has the right to like or dislike whatever they want. I mean, there's plenty of cars, that I like the looks of, others that I don't like the looks of. And the same is true for everybody. There's nothing, I don't think that there's probably any vehicle on the road that everybody loves. And setting aside the aesthetics, which I'm not a fan of, but that's fine. I can deal with that. I mean, if you like the way it looks, that's fine. Sure, everybody has the right to their opinion on things like that. But what I do have an issue with is the way that they have built this thing. So these stainless steel panels. So first of all, if you look at literally every other vehicle on the road, you open the doors, you open the hood, you open various panels, and you look at the edges of those metal components. What you will find is that, when they stamp those things, they roll the edges over. So they don't just slice these panels out of a sheet of steel or aluminum and then just leave the sharp edges on there. They roll the edges over so you have a slightly rounded edge. And there's a reason for that. It's for safety. Because when you grab the edge of those, you don't want people getting cut.
Yes.
On the Cybertruck, all of these stainless steel panels are stamped out of large sheets of stainless steel, and they literally are just slicing them off, and they're not doing any rolling of the edges.
Where is it? Because I'm looking at your note where it says sharp door panels. Was that you saw that, or was someone complaining?
No. Well, I mean, I've seen it in videos, but then when I actually went and, opened the doors and I'm looking at them, if you look at the edges of the doors, you can see, where it's been literally sliced by the stamping
And I'm
press.
wondering, I'm not arguing with you, but I'm wondering, because I literally thought that. I'm like, because when I opened the door and I looked at it, I'm like, that is just an edge. Like there's no roll to it. But I did, like an idiot, run my thumb down it, and it wasn't actually sharp. But I'm wondering if it's like, would it really have depended where I had run my thumb down that door?
Because it's not even.
Because so I was like at the front door, the one that happened to be the auto show, and you can see like as it comes down, it's rounded. What the corner would be is not like a point. It was like a rounded curve down, but it is just, there's no roll to it. It's just like, the edge of the metal, but it was smooth because I ran my hand over the curve and down a little bit. But I think, like you're saying, the problem is if that's not consistent, if I got the smooth spot, I'm fine. Maybe on the other side, I sliced my thumb open.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not Tesla. It's not like a knife edge, but it's sharp enough that you will feel it. And it's, for example, I was sitting in the truck with Sebastian Blanco.
Yeah.
And I was in the passenger seat. He was in the driver's seat. And when I went to get out, as I often do, I grabbed the A-pillar, as I'm getting out. And those pieces along the edge of the door, around the aperture of the door, it's the same thing there. It's just no rolled edges, just sharp. And you can feel that. And it's very uncomfortable. But
interesting.
my bigger concern is actually with the front end of the vehicle. Because if you look at the front edge of the fenders, the front edge of the trunk lid, the front lid, all of those, it's the exact same thing. They're literally just sliced off. There's nothing rounded.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you were to hit a pedestrian with one of those things, with a Cybertruck, I mean, that would do way more damage than something that's got a little more rounded
edges.
contours to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's extremely dangerous. And I think that I'm pretty sure that this vehicle will never ever be sold in Europe, because in Europe, unlike here in the US, they have pedestrian protection standards.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way this thing would ever pass pedestrian protection standards, because there's no give to any of this stuff. It's solid, and you've got those sharp edges, and it would cause really serious injuries if you struck a pedestrian or a cyclist with this truck. And there was also a picture I posted, in a reply on one of your posts on Threads, that also showed the rear corner by the tailgate. Where the corner is actually rounded, and it looks like they stamped it, and then somebody just took a wheel grinder and just kind of ground it off. I mean, it's just, it looks terrible. But again, it's still these sharp edges and very uneven edges, and I think it's not good. And then the other thing is, when you're inside, you've got this steeply sloped windshield that goes way down, and
with the world's most giant windshield wiper.
4-foot long windshield wiper. But you cannot see the hood at all. You have no visibility of where the edge of the vehicle is.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you have one of these and you're planning to take it off road, I strongly recommend that you put some flags on the corners so you know where the corners are.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you have zero visibility of anything beyond the edge of that glass, because it just it's just one continuous line down, and you cannot see any of the hood at all, and you have no idea where the corners are. So that's kind of problematic. And then one of the other things, that tonneau cover, which is a pretty much more robust tonneau cover than the one that Rivian had on the R1T, the original one. It's apparently, and I think it's generally a better design. But one issue with it is that, unlike your power windows, like in your car, in any car built in the last 25, 30 years, if you've got power windows, and you go to put the windows up, you put your hand on that window, it'll stop. There's a torque sensor in there that'll, as soon as all you got to do is put your hand on it, so it'll stop, so it doesn't decapitate anybody or slice off fingers. That tonneau cover does not do that. You press that button. If you try to stop it, it will keep going. So that's not great from a safety perspective. So
true.
There's a lot of issues, that like I said, aesthetics aside, just the way that they've constructed this thing that are not great from a safety perspective.
Yeah, there's concerns, definitely.
Yeah. And then, also, whether you have a Cybertruck or any other Tesla or a Jeep Wrangler, please, if you go out and buy an Apple Vision Pro, do not wear it while you're behind the driver's seat. I mean, we've seen videos of morons in Teslas doing this over the past week and a half. But I was talking to my friend Will Matisse at the show the other day. I don't know if you know Will.
I do.
Yeah. And he lives here in the Detroit area. He was at 12 Oaks Mall in Novi last week. And there's an Apple store there. And he was parking his car, and he saw somebody drive by in a Jeep Wrangler wearing an Apple Vision Pro.
Oh, God. Is that legal at all? If the cops see you, can they pull you over?
I would hope so.
Legal. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, yes, the Vision Pro does have, pass through, optical, or it has camera pass through. Right. So, the cameras on the front of it will show on the displays what's in front of you. But, if you look at any of the reviews, it's the field. First of all, the field of view is much more restricted than what you have when your eyes are fully exposed. You have no peripheral vision.
Right.
And also, the resolution is not as good as what you get, when you're just looking with your eyes. So do not wear a Vision Pro or any other VR goggles. The Quest, the Meta Quest goggles also have, that pass through that's not as good as what's on the Vision Pro. Do not wear those while you're driving. Please.
It seems like such a like, and the person's like, I wonder if you could drive with this. I'm sure we all do, but don't do that. Like I know you're really curious if it'll do it. You probably could, but should you? There's a lot you could do while you're driving.
Yeah.
Should you do it? Don't.
All right. One last Chicago related thing. Chris and Julie Ramsey were there. And you saw them at the breakfast on Thursday morning.
Yes. Yeah. On the breakfast.
This is a British couple that have done some adventures with EVs, previously with Nissan Leafs. Like they drove a Nissan Leaf from London to Mongolia a couple of years back. Mm-hmm. Last year they got a Nissan Aria that they drove from the magnetic North Pole to the South Pole in Antarctica. And they had the pole-to-pole Aria was there on display, complete with its 39-inch off-road tires.
It looked absolutely crazy. It was fantastic. Those giant tires. It was crazy.
What did you think of what they did?
I thought it was really neat, and it was fun listening to them because they had a neat story and they have sorts of little bits and pieces to, share about some of the interesting things that happened on their venture and what it was like driving that in anything, much less what they drove it in, you know what I mean, is quite an adventure. So I thought it was neat. I thought it was an interesting adventure for them. I thought it was cool. I thought they had nice stories to share, and they talked a lot about how a large part of the entire venture for them were the personal bits. You meet some interesting people, have some interesting human experiences along the way. I thought it was a really great story.
Yeah. And also, to demonstrate that, yes, you can drive an EV virtually anywhere on the planet. And they, one of the things they did, they worked with a company called NLX, which is a European energy company. They're involved in the charging space, to get chargers installed, public chargers installed in South America along part of the route. So I had a chance to sit down with Julie and Chris and talk about what they did and how they did it and why they did it. So I'm going to drop that interview in here and we will be right back. So we're here with Julie and Chris Ramsey. The two of you had an interesting adventure last year, the latest in a string of adventures. But in going back, like over the last dozen years, we've seen it's been proven that you can do longer road trips in an EV. Tesla built out their supercharger network. Other companies have tried to do that with varying degrees of lack of success. But the two of you went to you did something really extreme. You drove from the North Pole to the North Magnetic Pole to the South Pole.
Yeah.
What on earth possessed you to do this in an EV?
Yeah. So, I think I'll pass over to Chris because he's the crazy one in our relationship. He's the one that, I don't know, sometimes I question you and ask you the same, even though we're together. It's like, well, why? Why pole to pole?
I mean, I guess it all started with the 24 kilowatt hour Leaf. Kind of like it's turned a hobby into a passion, pretty much. Discovering the Leaf over a decade ago and going on a journey with that car, putting it on social media, and people enjoying seeing a car put through the highs and the lows of an EV ownership at that time. And then I've kind of progressed to loads of crazy other adventures. And then Julie and I in 2017 drove the Mongol Rally, London to Mongolia, basically in a Nissan Leaf again. And pole to pole for me was like, how can I do an adventure that shows people really the facts about what the capabilities are of EVs. When through the extreme cold, extreme heat, and just trying to debunk all those myths, all those preconceptions and negative points that people have about EVs. And pole to pole kind of encapsulated all those into one expedition that said, you can drive long distance, you can drive in the cold, you can drive in extreme heat, you can use the climate control, you can use the heating, and all these things, and just put it into one expedition.
I think Chris has always been into cars. I mean, since he was a young kid, he used to have posters of various types of cars on the wall, right? And I think your passion of cars just switched to EVs when the technology came out. And it was a bit of a hobby turned passion, turned into where we are today. So just going from smaller journeys into much bigger ones. But something I want to add that I don't say very often is that I feel like if someone had a superpower, your superpower would be driving long distances in an EV, because not everybody has that ability.
Well, it certainly takes a lot of patience.
Yeah, and that's something that Chris has a lot of, is patience. And yeah, because it takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of preparation, and a lot of people would maybe not last or give up very quickly, but I would say if you had a superpower, I think you found your superpower, and that is endurance driving, EV driving, and I think that's...
I think it's worth noting that driving from the magnetic North Pole to South Pole, to make the car possible, the modifications we did actually nearly enough half the range of the vehicle. If you have over a 300-mile range, the car has really, realistically, 150 miles an hour of range. We could get more out of it in hilly environments. You're getting the regen bracket, but about 150 miles. So the patience and the ability to do, and the planning and execution is all based around the fact that we had half the range car. So you wouldn't have to do as much planning if you have a regular Aria or a regular EV, because you have 300 plus miles of range. So there's that element to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at an Aria. This is clearly not an off-road SUV. This is not a Jeep Wrangler, or a Land Rover.
And they're not built to be.
So how did you transform an Aria, a stock Aria, into something that you could drive from almost the top of one end of the world to the other?
So the main thing is the wheels.
Yeah.
We'll see straight away there's huge 39-inch BF Goodrich KO2 tires on there. And the wheels are predominantly for the polar regions. It's to enable you to traverse through the deep snow, thick snow conditions in polar regions. So Arctic trucks, the polar experts when it comes to expeditions in those regions, and they also modify the cars too to make it suitable. Yep. They did our car in Iceland and made it suitable, I guess.
Yep.
Other than the tires, then we put a protection plate on the underside of the car to protect the battery from any bumps, scrapes. Which
you had a few.
It's got a few dents in there, because the way I describe it is like when we were up in the Arctic region, it's off-roading, extreme off-roading, and you're
literally
You're in
hundreds of miles or thousands of miles from an actual paved road.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes in order to get through some thick, deep snow, you need speed. And sometimes we apply a little too much speed, you take air. Mm-hmm. And when the air comes, you crash down. And if there's any rocks there or hard solid ice, then it can cause a lot of damage. So so there's a few whirlwinds, isn't there, on the car. And the other thing is the tow hitches.
And then you've got the three towage receiver points on the front and the back. And the idea behind those is, if you ever have a situation where you need to change a tire or you need to do any kind of maintenance work, we can then jack the car up at the either side, left corner, right corner, or in the middle. And then also when we got stuck in areas of really thick, deep snow, where we got bogged down and we were too bombed out that we couldn't dig ourselves out, then the support vehicle would connect us up and pull us out. And likewise, they do the same for each other. But it's worth mentioning that the drivetrain, the battery, the suspension system is all factory Aria. The idea behind the projects that we do is to say, here's effectively a stock vehicle that you can buy from the showroom. This is really what it's capable of. This is showing you and demonstrating to you just what it can do.
So, given the complaints we hear from people in more populated areas about charging infrastructure, how do you charge this thing in polar regions? There's certainly no public charging infrastructure or even anything else.
Yeah, so there's obviously no charging stations up in the polar regions. So we had to take a reliable source with us. And that reliable source at the moment is a petrol generator. And so we took a 7 kilowatt petrol generator with us to charge the car. So it's like our mobile charging station. But we didn't just stop there. We wanted to innovate and try other solutions, cleaner solutions out of there to charge the car. And we introduced a windmill, a 5 kilowatt windmill up in the Arctic, and a solar array down in Antarctica. And we kind of built a prototype hybrid charging system whereby when we charge the car, the fuel is being offset by the renewable energy being produced through the windmill and the solar panels.
So how well did those alternative solutions work out for you?
So in Antarctica, they worked really well. We had 20.
That was mostly solar there?
Yeah. So the idea behind it is the inverter that sits between the generator and the solar panel. It just kind of says, I don't need as much power for you from the generator. I'm taking good power from the solar. So it kind of meant we used about a third less of fuel. In the Arctic, we had a slightly different scenario. When we, the second windiest place on the planet, only second to Antarctica. When we got there, a couple of days before we got there, it was like really bad heavy winds. And the guys were telling us construction stopped, this is really bad. When we arrived, the sun came out, the wind went away, and it didn't come back until we left.
So it's like being in a dead calm on the sea.
And that's why it comes back to, that's why we had the generator. Because at the moment, the technology around generators hasn't advanced enough at this point in time to make a very reliable renewable energy generator, like a hydrogen or whatever it be. So that's why we had to stick with the petrol generator. It's the only way.
Yeah.
So
the thing is this is a world's first, this expedition. No car in history, and I think combustion engine vehicles have been around for about 150 years. No car in history has ever done this kind of journey before. So, yeah, I think we would not have been allowed, permitting-wise, approvals-wise, to go in without reliable charging support. And, and I think, it was the only solution at the time, but we want to work and improve on these solutions to hopefully one day be, completely renewable. But we're not at that stage yet. Baby steps, step by step.
Everything's a transition in every industry at the moment. So,
So did you carry all of this gear in the Aria, or was it carried in the support truck that was following it?
Combinations. So at times we pulled the windmill until we did eventually leave that behind because we had no winds. We thought there was no point in taking it with us. So we left it at one point. So we kind of pulled it.
Were you towing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it was left behind, and then we went to the Mount Cole, came back, collected him, took it back to the village. With the solar panels, they went in the back of the car.
Yeah.
And then at times we put them in with the support vehicle as well. So we kind of shared the load.
Okay. Now, one of the things you talked about in your presentation this morning was, part of the goal of this was to help expand charging infrastructure.
Yeah, correct.
Talk a little bit about that.
So what's really important for us is when we do these adventures is to adventure with a purpose, and our legacy is to, work with the charging infrastructure companies and work with them to put chargers in the ground, permanent chargers in the ground, so other people who EV drive in the future can use those and get to where they want to go. So we partnered up with NLX Way, who are amazing, fundamental to the success of Pole-to-Pole. And they've put numerous chargers for us where there was gaps in South America.
Yep.
So if we speak about Peru as an example, prior to the Pole-to-Pole project, there was how many?
About
three chargers in the whole country.
And that was it. That were all set
Fast chargers or just public chargers of any
in
kind?
general. And it was in public chargers in general. And they were centered in Lima, the capital city. And that was it.
Yeah, so when we partnered up with NLX Way and told them about our project, they loved it. And they actually used our project to encourage and speak with local businesses and install chargers in their premises. And that's what they did. So now, whoever goes through Peru, north to south, can do it in an EV because there's one every 100, 150 miles approximately. And so for us, it's really important to leave that legacy behind forevermore and to continue building on that aspect because, it's adventuring with a purpose, as I say.
Yeah.
So you've now driven an EV from London to Mongolia. You've driven one all around the UK. Yeah. You've driven one from the North Pole to the South Pole, 22,000 miles over 10 months, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's next?
The rest. And again, I guess it comes down to the purpose. What we're kind of doing just now is obviously we're here in the auto show, which is really cool, getting people to be able to see Sonrisa. Sonrisa, the name of the area, because Sonrisa is the Spanish name for smile.
Okay.
And everybody who sees us smiles. Mm-hmm. It brings joy to a lot of people's faces, so we named the Sonrisa. So it's kind of like showing Sonrisa around and kind of letting people see her, get to hear our story. but we're looking at ways at how we can take what we've learned from the expedition of how the kindness and generosity we got from people, how we can find ways to give back to people, give back to society, give back to the planet. That's kind of our focus just now.
And education as well, wherever we can get involved with education, children, different communities, initiatives, just using that platform to continue advocating for EVs and continue just showing to the public just how exciting, how reliable and how capable they are. And, we are, the purpose, I guess, for doing something like Pole to Pole is kind of proving, not just seeing it, oh, the car can do Pole to Pole, but living and breathed it, if that makes sense. So we can say, or genuinely say...
Yeah, I mean, you spent every single day for 10 months with this vehicle.
With this vehicle. Yeah. So we know exactly how it performs, and we know exactly where the pitfalls are, and we can genuinely say that Aria performed amazingly.
It's incredible.
The build quality of it is amazing, and the EVs nowadays are capable, and the other thing is we tell people be inspired by our story, but we take things to the extreme. Pole to Pole is the extreme. Not everybody's going to do Pole to Pole tomorrow, but the fact that we could do Pole to Pole in a Nissan Aria, that's probably half this range because of the modifications that we've put on with the wheels, the rooftop tent, extra height, etc. And harshest of environments in terms of extreme cold, extreme hot, all the different terrains that the car's been through. So if we can do that, then surely for most
you can do something on a smaller scale locally.
Exactly. So I just hope people, are inspired by it, and or maybe convinced that the EVs are capable.
It's a way just for us to say, look, we're just sharing this knowledge. We've demonstrated, so we share the knowledge. What you choose to do with it is up to you guys. It's kind of saying that again, these guys have done it, so I can take that on board and think, okay, maybe my perception has changed because I've seen what they've done. It's just use that knowledge in any way that you want, and hopefully it inspires you to go electric, or inspires you to look at maybe people start with hybrids or whatever your journey to electrification is. Hopefully this just inspires you to start that journey.
And we respect it's not for everybody.
Sure.
We respect that, and we also respect that it's not perfect, but they've come a long way in the decade that they've been around. If you think about 10 years ago with the original Leaf to some of the cars that we see on the show floor here today.
Yeah, you were going 60 miles on a charge in that first generation Leaf.
Yeah. To now 400, 500, 600 miles?
Yeah, and, in this, even with all the modifications on this, you can still go 150 miles. And, and stock one, you need 300.
Yeah, I was doing 1,600 mile road trips in a 65 mile range Leaf.
So you are very patient.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't charge very fast either.
Yeah, and it's kind of saying to people, but we understand things aren't perfect, and it's like charging infrastructure you indicated. I mean, there are a great backbone of chargers here in the US and as well in Canada. There are some reliability issues that some of the charging companies need to get around, but it's like everything. When petrol first started, back in the Bertha Benz days, way back in them, charging.
There were no gas stations around in 1886.
And then when they were putting gas stations in the ground, there was teething problems. There weren't big enough distances between each. So there's all these things, like with any technology, there's learning curves to overcome, but I think it's happening a lot faster with EVs.
But if you're fortunate enough to have your own drive with access to a plug socket at home, then 99% of your charging will be at home, and you won't rely on the public infrastructure. The public infrastructure is designed for people doing long distances, but for the range that EVs give you today, that should cover most of people's daily needs. So I feel like we're at a really exciting time here, and we're at that. I remember 10 years ago, people say, "Oh, the cars don't have the range." There was always an excuse, wasn't there? They don't have the range. Now we're at the range. Oh, their infrastructure is not good. I always feel there's always a reason, a barrier to change, or people resisting the change. There's always something. But hey, in this decade, we can see how things move so fast. I'm really excited for the next decade and where that technology is going to bring us.
Yeah, I think that probably, aside from, making sure the charging infrastructure works, the next big barrier is just affordability. getting more affordable EVs.
When that comes to supply and demand, the more people buy, the cost will come down. Any new technology is on the market is going to be expensive. So it's a catch-22, isn't it? It's getting more people to buy, and that cost will come down. But yeah, I agree. It's still a big issue, isn't it, the cost?
Well, thank you both so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Pleasure to meet you both.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Congratulations on accomplishing this amazing feat.
Like,
All right. And we're back. I also had a chance this week to chat with Chris Fuel, who we've talked with before. She is the CEO of the Chrysler brand at Stellantis. And the reason we talked this time is Chrysler is dropping a new concept car this week called the Halcyon. You've seen the Halcyon. What did you think?
I mean, I think as concept cars go, it's really an interesting exercise in many things, in design and technology and all these things. But I think the thing with concept cars is I always wonder how much of the concept will become car in any reasonable period of time. And sometimes you look at a concept car and you think I can eyeball that and go 75% of that could easily be in my car tomorrow. Like it looks like it could be reworked to be in the car. 25% of that sucker is not happening anytime soon, and there's things
I'm guessing it's probably more like, at least 50-50, maybe 25% will get into your car.
And I felt
75%.
Right. And I felt like this one, although it was beautiful and interesting, I felt like it was even more so like, when could all this happen? But what did you think, Sam?
I mean, I think it's a great design. It's funny, a couple of years ago, Chrysler unveiled the Airflow concept. So this electric crossover concept. And then, they indicated at the time that was going to be their first EV coming in 2025 for the Chrysler brand. And they were also going to be introducing a bunch of new nameplates for Chrysler, like 4 to 6. And then last fall, Ralph Gilles, who's head of design for Stellantis, indicated that they've kind of shifted the design direction for the Chrysler brand. And what we saw in the Airflow is that's not quite what the production models are going to look like, or other future ones. And so what we're seeing here with the Halcyon is the first indication of the design language that they're adopting for the Chrysler brand going forward. So it's more sharp edges. The Halcyon there's some elements like, for example, what we saw in the, first of all, it's a sedan, a fastback sedan. Some elements of what we saw in the Charger Daytona, which is coming, the first Dodge EV with that sort of front wing blade thing, and then the opening underneath that flows up over the windshield. And then, but then there's some Porsche Taycan in the sides. I think it's a fantastic design. How much of this we'll see making it to the production electric Chryslers in the next few years is a big question mark.
I was like, how much do you see that percentage thing we were talking about earlier?
And,
how much of a percentage?
The logo that we first saw in the Airflow is something that will be on the new Chryslers.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's, features prominently on this concept as well. This thing's got, suicide doors and upward folding hatches, so getting in and out should be very easy. But of course, you won't see that on production models. That's one of those things that they put on show cars, so that you can get a great view of the interior. Designers love those because you can show an unobstructed view of the interior.
And they also look super impressive. They look very like space agey and futuristic, like, wow, but they never, that's the sad part for me. I'm like, I want some of this to actually make it to a consumer vehicle, and they don't.
But, Chris did tell me that there will be sedans in the Chrysler brand's future. So it's not going to be just crossovers going forward. So we will have cars, and, something shaped roughly like this should be part of the lineup in the next couple of years.
I think that'd be nice. Everyone talks about Stellantis, with them pulling out of the auto show and with various things that have happened, that like, what's going on over there? Like, what are those people doing over there? what's happening? Are you guys okay? Like everyone's a little concerned. So I'd like to see Chrysler have more than just the Pacifica, which
Yeah.
is a great minivan, but it's like the 300. Is the 300 officially gone?
It's out of
yet?
production, but
Okay.
over the course of the last several months, they built up a bunch of inventory,
Okay.
so that they would still have 300s to sell through probably, at least into the middle of this year, maybe into the fall. So if you want a 300, I mean, you can't get like the final edition 300Cs; those are all sold out. But there are 300s that are available at Chrysler dealers. So you'll be able to get those for at least the next 6 months or so. There'll still be some inventory around. So if that's something that's of interest, yeah. And my guess is the same is also true for the Charger and Challenger. You obviously
that
can't
they'll
get
be-
stuff like the Demon 170, but
Right.
there's probably some Chargers and Challengers on, that'll be on dealer lots for quite a few more months.
Did you see, talking about Stellantis, that the supply of Gladiators is apparently quite large? I keep getting advertisements for Gladiators at 15% below MSRP.
Oof. Yeah.
Not like my local Jeep dealer, just like Jeep in general. I'm like, wowza, you guys have a lot of those, don't you?
Yeah. Gladiator sales have not been great. They haven't been jumping off the lots.
No. So if you want a Gladiator, now's your moment, people.
Yeah. So I'm going to drop the conversation I had with Chris Fuel in here, and we'll be right back. I watched the most of the backgrounder last week. I was actually in transit while it was going on, and excuse me. So I had a chance to see the new Halcyon concept, which is a fascinating design. Hopefully we'll see some of those design ideas come to fruition in Chrysler brand vehicles in the not too distant future. But I wanted to talk with you today a little bit about kind of how the brand how you're moving forward on the transformation of the brand. We've talked a couple of times over the last couple of years since you took charge of the Chrysler brand. And, I think the first time we talked when the Airflow was publicly revealed, the Airflow concept, talked at that time about expanding the brand out to 4 to 6 nameplates, going all electric with the Chrysler brand. Right now you're down to one nameplate, the Pacifica, or I guess technically 2. Do they still offer the Voyager version of it? I can't remember, but at any rate, you've got one vehicle. So how is the overall strategy for the Chrysler brand progressing?
Right. Well, the strategy is progressing on target. We knew that we were going to have this 12 to 18 month period where we have Pacifica ICE, Pacifica plug-in hybrid, and the Voyager, which is just sold through the fleet channel. We also have a pretty healthy inventory of 300s, which, as you know, we stopped production of at the end of last calendar year. And it's such a popular and enthusiast-oriented vehicle. We wanted to make sure that there was plenty of inventory to carry us through the year. So, dealers do have the Pacifica and the 300 in stock today, and we continue to build the Voyager for U.S. fleet. And it's also rebranded as the Grand Caravan in Canada.
Okay. So how long do you expect new 300s will still be available at dealers across North America?
Well, they're selling down the inventory. So for those who really want a Chrysler 300, I wouldn't wait too long. I think that we'll see that inventory get sold down by the middle of the year or third quarter of this year.
Okay. So looking forward, to the next stage of the Chrysler brand, you're going to start introducing some battery electric vehicles. Well, I guess first, let me step back. Is the plan still to go exclusively battery electric with the Chrysler brand over the next several years?
That is our strategy and our plan. As we introduce brand new products under the Chrysler brand, they will be offered as exclusive battery electric propulsion systems.
Okay.
Starting with the crossover that I've spoken about, that will be launched in 2025.
So I know there's been some speculation around at least some of the vehicles off the Stella Large platform potentially being certainly it's been said by Chrysler or by Stellantis that the Stella Large platform will support both some internal combustion and battery electric. Sounds like there's no plan, at least within the Chrysler lineup, to have any internal combustion going forward on new models?
Not for new models, but to your point, the Stella Large platform is a multi-energy platform and offers internal combustion, plug-in hybrid, and full battery electric. And what's nice about that is as market and customer dynamics shift or change, it gives us options. But at this point, our product strategy is to migrate the brand to full battery electric.
Okay. And as I said, when we first spoke, you talked about 4 to 6 models in the lineup. Is that still the plan? And, without, obviously you can't get into specifics, but, can you give us an idea of kind of the breadth of what the model lineup might look like in the coming years?
Yeah, I can't speak to the specific number of new products that we will be coming out with in that time frame, but I will say that the new model entries will cover product segments that are growth segments that we haven't played in either ever or in a very long time. And obviously, the large crossover vehicle is one segment that Chrysler has not had an entry in. So that's brand new white space for us. What you see in the form of the Halcyon concept is our nod to the car segment. I'm a believer in the car segment. I think that there are customers out there who love their cars. They love the way they drive and handle on road. And the car platform that the Halcyon is conceived on delivers not only fantastic driving dynamics, but also fantastic range, because you don't have all of the equipment and components that you would find in a crossover or a full SUV. And because of the fact that, we're the company and the brand that created the minivan segment, our intention is to completely disrupt that segment once again and redefine it.
Okay. I'm looking forward to see what Chrysler can come up with in that segment. Kind of looking more broadly, as a brand, Chrysler, over the last decade or so, you've had the Pacifica 300. What do you see what does the Chrysler brand represent within the Stellantis lineup and within the larger automotive landscape? What's the theme for the brand that differentiates it?
So the theme or ethos of the brand is harmony and motion. And what I love about that ethos is that it represents not only clean technology and doing right by the planet, but also doing right by our customers, giving them mobility and technology options that make their life easier, not more complicated. And that extends to the product, the technology that is integrated through Stella Brain Smart Cockpit and Auto Drive, so that it's advanced technology for real life, not just for technology's sake. And also extending that to the purchase and ownership experience. We have been piloting digital sales processes in certain markets around the country, and we're doing this in partnership with our dealers, not independently of our dealers. Customers have told us that they want flexibility over how they research and purchase a vehicle. They want a process that saves them time. And what we are finding is giving them the option of configuring a vehicle online, executing a trade valuation entirely online, applying for credit and financing alternatives online, executing the purchase and scheduling delivery saves them hours compared to the traditional process. But we think it's important that we keep the dealer tied to that process. Number one, because they have the inventory. Number two, in many cases, there's a wet signature or a finalization of contracts that are required that the dealer absolutely has to perform. And sometimes it has to be done in person. And they're also the best one to execute the test drive as well as the vehicle delivery process on the customer's terms. They may want it done at their home or at their place of work. And so we offer that flexibility. What we're seeing from the customers who have purchased through that process is a near perfect sales satisfaction score compared to the traditional process. So we think that this is definitely something that we want to expand and scale.
So, as you transition to an electric lineup, there's certainly a lot of challenges, both for Stellantis, for Chrysler, also for the dealers in terms of the investment they have to make in new tooling, new tools, new training for their employees, but also for the customers and for educating the customers and making sure that the customers are getting into the right kind of vehicle to, as you mentioned, guaranteeing customer satisfaction, making sure that you pair up the customer with the vehicle that's going to fit their needs and their lifestyle. What sorts of things are you looking at to improve on that, and to either whether it's making sure that the dealer personnel are trained to help guide the customers in the right direction, or extended test drive programs, helping with installing charging at home. What types of things are you looking at there?
Yeah, those are all really good questions, Sam. And there are a couple of ways to go after overcoming objections and helping the customers to choose the vehicle that's right for them and their needs. Because of the fact that so many of our dealerships have all brands under one roof, we have to have consistency for the way in which we help our dealers upgrade their infrastructure with the charging technology that's appropriate for their market, as well as the tools and the technical training, and ensuring that they have a certain number of technicians fully certified to service and repair the battery electric vehicles. And the same holds true for the plug-in hybrid vehicles. They're both high voltage battery systems. And the same holds true on the sales side. We are seeing that for those salespeople that have completed all of the training and certification for plug-in hybrid and battery electric vehicles, their sales satisfaction scores are significantly higher than those who haven't fully completed the training. So we're being very diligent and persistent with ensuring that every dealer has a minimum number and a targeted number of certified sales representatives, as well as technicians and service advisors, so that we are performing the right customer handling process and qualifying the customers in the right way to ensure that we're aligning a vehicle that best meets their needs. So that's one way that we're handling it in the retail environment. The other thing that we are doing at the brand level is updating our digital and website material with a series of questions to help the customer to qualify their needs, to determine what kind of vehicle is going to best meet their needs. In some case, it might not be a battery electric vehicle. It might be a plug-in hybrid, for example. The other thing we want to help them to do is connect the dots between where they live and where they're purchasing the vehicle and what tax incentives might be available to them to offset some of the costs associated with purchasing the vehicle. There are certainly federal incentives available, but many customers may not be aware that there are local incentives available as well. And we want to help them through that process. And then the education piece that you mentioned is something that's ongoing. We can't just put educational content out to the customers and then drop it. It's something that we are maintaining a consistency of, and we've created a series of educational modules that we post on TikTok and Instagram that sort of myth bust some of the ideas that people think about a plug-in hybrid. This is centered around the Pacifica plug-in hybrid, because there are some people who think that it's a full battery electric vehicle when in fact it's paired with an internal combustion engine, which is really the best of both worlds for people who are looking to dip their toe into the electrification pond.
And certainly on the BEV side, I'm in Chicago right now for the auto show as we're talking. Recently when we had a cold snap, there were a lot of national news reports about people getting stuck and stranded trying to get charging. I think as you go to an EV, one of the things you need to do is perhaps change your mindset a little bit about the way you use the vehicle, away from the traditional mindset of with an internal combustion vehicle, you can just pop into a gas station, fill it up in 5 minutes and be on your way again. There's a lot of emphasis being put on installing more DC fast charging, but that's not always necessarily the best or most economical solution. And if people don't know the best ways to utilize an EV, plug it in at night, keep it charged up. Don't let the battery run down, especially in those kinds of conditions. Is that part of the strategy that you're working on to make sure your consumers are informed?
Yeah, that's part of the education process. And certainly for people who own battery electric vehicles, it tends to require more upfront planning for charging than what you might have to deal with with an ICE vehicle. But the fact of the matter is nearly 90% of consumers who own battery electric vehicles exclusively charge at home. And so to your point, making sure that you are charging your vehicle overnight or during the day when you're not driving it is the best way to ensure that you have a full state of charge and you're ready to go.
Okay. Let's jump back to product now, and particularly around the Halcyon concept. I think it's interesting that that this concept is effectively a sedan form factor, as a lot of the industry has moved away from traditional car shapes, car form factors. 60 to 7, somewhere between 60 and 70% of the U.S. market now is some form of crossover or SUV. Why go with a sedan? And I think you mentioned earlier that you still see sedans or cars as an important part of the future lineup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's completely my belief. I think people will become bored with some of the crossover utility vehicle designs that are out there because they are all looking the same. And there are people who want an alternative that offers a beautiful exterior and interior design coupled with the versatility of configuring the interior to carry the things that they need, whether it be additional people, pets, luggage, bikes, and things like that. And the Halcyon concept has a very unique interior design that allows for a lot of versatility and configurability to use that space in a variety of ways. As you noticed, the design language of that car is just absolutely stunning. And it fully represents the future design theme that we will be carrying across every brand new Chrysler that we launch starting in 2025 and beyond.
Okay. Yeah, I know, I think a couple of months ago or a few months ago, Ralph Gilles talked about, the airflow concept. It was originally sort of intended to be, I think, the first of these electric Chryslers. That's going to change significantly. So it sounds like we're going to see more of what we see in that Halcyon coming to whatever this product is next year and what follows.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I think the airflow was a good first step for us to showcase what Chrysler could look like in the future. And as Ralph and I continued to collaborate and talk about how do we bring harmony and motion to life for Chrysler, and how do we really push the boundaries of contemporary and modern and sustainable design, we knew that we could get a little edgier with the vehicle, because if people felt comfortable with the airflow when we first introduced it in 2022, we thought, we're not going far enough with this design. It's too conservative.
Okay. I'm curious about, more with across that overall harmony and motion theme and where Chrysler fits into this ecosystem. Stellantis has a number of North American brands. You've got Ram is pretty obvious, focus on trucks, Jeep, SUVs, off-road, rugged. Dodge, the performance muscle. And there's Alfa Romeo, doing their sort of Italian performance thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where does the Chrysler brand fit in? Do you intend it to be a more mainstream brand, more premium luxury, maybe kind of jumping, kind of spreading across that spectrum? What does it look? Give me a little more idea of what the brand looks like 3, 4, or 5 years from now.
Sure. Well, today the Chrysler brand is pretty squarely positioned in the upper mainstream segment from a content and a price point standpoint. And we intend our future products to be positioned in that similar space. And if we reflect on what I was talking about regarding what harmony and motion represents in the form of sustainability and seamless connected mobility, and the ease and frictionless approach to how customers can purchase a vehicle, as well as the ownership experience on the product level compared to the other brands in the portfolio, Chrysler is really going to be the range leader and also a leader in intuitive connected technology. We'll let Dodge own the performance space. We'll let Jeep own the off-road space, and you will not see a pickup truck in the Chrysler portfolio.
That's good to hear, because I think if you're going to have multiple brands, having some distinction between those brands makes sense. I mean,
it's so important. Yeah. We'll be more about on-road efficiency and being fun to drive.
Okay. Let's see. Is there anything else that people should be thinking about with the Chrysler brand as we move forward into 2025 and beyond? What can people be looking forward to expect from this brand?
Well, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the brand has actually been growing since I joined Stellantis in 2021. We were up 19% year over year in 2023, and 22% of that growth came from Pacifica. And Pacifica plug-in hybrid was up 60%. And so we have been on a very positive trajectory for growing our sales as well as our profitability. And yes, we're down to 3 nameplates, but the new nameplates that we're adding are going to really represent the future direction of Chrysler, centered around harmony and motion. But we also don't want to forget the fact that we've got this incredible minivan in our portfolio, the Pacifica, and we are continuing to invest in that product as well as the brand new battery electric products that we'll be launching between now and the end of the decade. So you can see a refresh plan for Pacifica coming relatively soon. I can't say exactly when. But it will also take on some of the design enhancements that you see in terms of cues from the Halcyon and the future products.
Okay. One last question. The logo, and the one that appears on your background right now as we're talking, it's on some teaser images, is that the new future interpretation of the winged Chrysler logo that we've had for a long time? Is that what's going to appear on the next generation of Chrysler vehicles?
It is. We introduced this logo when we revealed the airflow a couple of years ago, and continued to show it with other future concepts like last year's synthesis reveal, and you'll see it in conjunction with the Halcyon reveal next week also. And the brand new products will also incorporate that logo throughout.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Any last thoughts you want to share?
No, we're just really excited about the future of Chrysler. As I said, we've been achieving year over year growth with our current products, and the growth trajectory once we start introducing the cadence of brand new products starting in 2025 looks very positive and very bright for the brand.
Based on the Halcyon, I'm really looking forward to seeing what the team can come up with. So thank you so much for your time, Chris. Always great to talk to you.
Thanks, Sam.
All right.
Good to talk to you as well.
All right. Let's finish up with some listener emails. We actually got some this week. So first up is Neil. I currently have a 2021 Hyundai Sonata Limited, and I'm thinking of replacing it. I'm looking for a car with as many safety features as possible. The current car has both a heads-up display and turn signal camera, or might be the blind spot camera. But I have I've not been able to find a car with both of these features. Can you recommend a car with both of these features? We would prefer a sedan, but a similarly sized SUV might be acceptable.
Does Hyundai Kia offers those, and does Honda still offer it?
Honda does not.
Or did they get rid of it? I think
they
it's
got
just
got
Hyundai
rid
Kia.
of it.
So
Yeah,
it's just Hyundai
basically,
Kia.
the 2024, 2025 Sonata and the Kia K5 are basically it in terms of
That's it.
sedans.
There you go. There's 2 cars.
Yeah. That's
It's
those
the
are the only
turn
ones that offer both of those features.
It's not the head-up display that gets you; it's that turn signal camera. That's the thing. That's the
and that is a
deciding
nice
factor
feature when you tap the turn signal stock. It'll show the view from the blind spot camera in the instrument cluster. On one side or the other.
Right.
So you can see right there. If there's anybody in your blind spot before you change lanes.
Honda had it for. Didn't they have a funky name for it?
They had a system called Lane Watch.
Lane Watch. That's what it was.
Which it display, and our Civic has that, and it was only on the passenger side, and it displays in the center touchscreen, not in the instrument cluster.
As much. I don't think
it's not really very useful
because because it gives you, anytime you hit that turn signal, it would give you that display. It's like, that's great if you're just in heavy traffic and you're changing lanes. But if you're in a city or, places where you need to see what's on your screen for navigation or whatever, and suddenly you're just looking at traffic cones blazing by on the right-hand side of you, you're like, crud, I need those directions. I'm not as much of a fan of that version, but I like it in the instrument cluster. Like Hyundai Kia does it is pretty good.
And not having it for the driver's side is also, a very limiting factor. If you wanted to switch to the left, or if you're if you wanted to, have a glance, before you open your door, look for any cars or cyclists coming along.
Right.
Just tap that turn signal and you see that display right there. It's very useful, but again, not available on the Hondas. So basically, Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis. Genesis has it as well. So like G70,
yes.
G80, as well as their assorted crossovers. Most of them have this available. So that's pretty much the limit there.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry, we don't have a lot of options for you.
All right. We also got one from Michael, who's a patron. Thank you very much, Michael. And
Thank you.
We appreciate your patronage. As a longtime listener and patron, I trust your expertise on all things automotive. Well, come on. If you've been listening that long, you should know better than that.
Nicely said there, Sam. I like that.
For the past 4+ years, I've been driving a Tesla Model 3, which is an excellent commuter, but bland to drive otherwise. Now that the California HOV sticker on the Tesla has expired, half of its reason for being is gone. Further, I'm reaching a mini midlife crisis and want to change vehicles later this spring. Earlier in my life, I drove mostly manual transmission cars. Yay! NB and NC Miata, 997, 911, second gen CTSV, E60 535, E82 128, and a Mark V GTI. Excellent, excellent taste in cars.
Nice little garage worth of cars there, my friend.
I'm thinking I'm ready to go back to daily driving a stick shift for the fun of it, even if that means a rougher commute. My budget is up to $40,000 new or used. The car needs 4 doors since it still needs to be practical and ferry my family of 4. So far, my list includes the Hyundai Elantra N, the Honda Civic Si, the Acura Integra Type A. Actually, I think that would be the Type S. No, the A-Spec.
A-Spec, yeah,
yes.
A-Spec.
I haven't been able to find a Civic Type R remotely close to my price range, and that hasn't been modded to almost grenading the engine. Is it worth pushing my budget to find a used manual ATS-V, Cadillac ATS-V? I keep up the great work on the podcast. Love all 3 of you, but would love to have some sort of reunion show. Bring back Dan and Rebecca. Working on that. Sorry, I forgot to mention that I'm avoiding VW products after a not great experience with my last GTI. I also have had 2 BMWs with their rubbery shifters, so been there, done that. My last manual was a Fiesta ST, which was awesome, but awesome fun, but too small for daily use. So yeah, I mean, I think any of those choices that you mentioned, the Civic Si, the Elantra N, the Integra A-Spec. All great options. You might consider, if you can find a used previous gen Civic Type R, that would be also a great choice. Again, especially if you can find one that's not modded, find one that's completely stock. Let's see, what else is there with a manual? There's not a whole lot of options left.
There's so few options out there for manual.
And especially at that $40,000 price point. Otherwise, I would consider, something like the BMW M2, but that's going to be a lot more than 40 grand.
That is such a fun car, though.
It is.
Do you want to break your budget? Do that.
Yeah.
But not with those seats. Remember that they have those horrible.
Oh yeah. Don't get the carbon package.
Seats.
Yeah. Don't get the carbon package.
Nobody get the carbon package on that, people. Nobody. I mean, Sam and I might not be right about everything, but do not get the carbon seats on that. Okay, continue.
Base Mustang GT is right around 40. I think they're a little under 40. So that's one to consider, and you can get that with the manual, 6-speed manual. Again, if you're looking used, you'll have a few more options. The ATS-V, great option with a manual. I would absolutely consider one of those. Especially like if you can, I don't know if an ATS-V Blackwing, the ATS-V would be before the Blackwing badging. So yeah, that would be the previous generation. I was thinking of CT4V Blackwing, but yeah, the manual ATS-V, fantastic option. I like that one. If you can find one of those, and you probably could get one of those for under 40 grand, used.
If you search around for it. Yeah, I bet you could. Yeah.
So that would be a great one to consider. But any of the other options are great as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Exactly what Sam said, and I'm happy that you're going. I love that your midlife crisis involves going back to a manual transmission car. That somehow amuses me a lot. I approve.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Finally, we have Rich, and says, "Love the show. I would like to make a comment on an impression that I keep on getting from you guys when it comes to Elon and Tesla. It seems to me that lately, and I don't know if it has anything to do with his political affiliation, but a lot of people in the media have seem to have done a 180 on Elon and no longer look at him as an innovator and a pioneer when it comes to mainstreaming EVs. I just get the sense that you guys maybe subconsciously don't feel the same for him anymore. And I don't understand why you tend to bash him at times and make snarky comments when it comes to his products. He is on the forefront of a new industry, taking chances and maybe doing things that's completely coloring outside the lines. May not follow the mainstream, but that's what makes him special, and in my eyes, great. We need to leave politics out of this and judge the man, his product, and his ideas. I would rank him right up there with Steve Jobs. Remember, he is one of ours. He puts a lot of Americans to work and invests a lot of money in this country. We need to stay behind him and promote Tesla as one of the great EV manufacturers in the world. Just my opinion and my impression listening to you guys for the last few years."
Okay, well, I'm just going to go on record saying I'm normally the one that is arguing with Sam and Robbie, dislike Elon, I think, more than I do, just on a personal Elon level. I think you guys aren't as much of an Elon fan as I am. And I tend to be a little bit kinder to Tesla, I think, than you guys are, which is not an argument, just how we feel. I think we feel a little bit differently about the brand. I think his politics get involved a lot, just not with our show, but with Elon in general. He's such a public figure, and he's so out there and can be abrasive and just speaks his mind and says whatever he wants to say because he has $1 gazillion and doesn't care if you like what he says or not. And I think that impacts how a lot of people feel about him and his company. I think, the interesting thing is, I think when you talk to people, even people that don't like Elon for a variety of reasons and don't like his politics and don't like his attitude, who are critical, and in many cases, rightly so, of some of the things that Tesla has done, will say, and I've even talked to some folks who are like really EV proponents within OEMs, that like, as much as you can hate on him, electric vehicles are as well known and as accepted, at least here, is largely due to Elon Musk and the Tesla becoming such a big deal so fast. There was a long time where you said electric vehicle and you meant Tesla, and you said Tesla and you meant every EV. Like they were synonymous. That was the only one out there. So I do think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Definitely. He's done some things like building out the charging network for his vehicles. When it was just open to Teslas, I know it's opening up to others soon, with the North American charging standard coming to everybody. But I do think, I'm going to agree with you, Rich, that I do think he's a little bit Steve Jobs-ish. People love to hate on Steve Jobs because he was a personality, and but he was also did a lot of stuff that other people probably wouldn't have done. Sometimes guys that are kind of unlikable in many ways and smart guys do stuff that ticks people off, but that sometimes ends up creating things that are kind of cool, like Tesla. I don't think we all hate on him. I think some people are more critical of him than others. But I'm not anti Elon Musk, and I am definitely not anti Tesla.
So my opinion is slightly different. I actually agree with you on quite a few things that you said, but there are things that I also disagree on. So first of all, I have, my opinion of Elon has not really fundamentally changed in the 16, 17 years I've been covering Tesla. From the time I first interviewed him back in 2008, and I'll include a link to a copy of that interview. It's quite lengthy, but you might find it interesting, but and that also includes some comments in there from Martin Eberhard, who was actually one of the co-founders of Tesla. Elon was not a co-founder of Tesla. He was given that title later. He came along after the fact, almost a year after they actually incorporated the company.
Mm-hmm.
But I have always given Tesla enormous credit for legitimizing the idea of EVs as a mainstream product that could work for anybody. I mean, they've done more than anyone to demonstrate that EVs are not just glorified golf carts. That these can be utilized for any purposes. Anything that you can use an internal combustion vehicle for, you can almost anything you can do with an ICE, you can do with an EV. There are still some edge exceptions, but for the most part, almost anyone can drive an EV as a daily driver and not really have an issue with that part of it. Certainly what they've done with the charging network, they deserve enormous credit for that. Demonstrating that having a robust charging network is one of the keys to driving EV adoption. Having interesting, cars, I'm not always crazy about their designs, but again, that's aesthetics. But they've done a lot of interesting things on the technology side in terms of the way the vehicles are architected, especially the electrical architecture and doing software defined. They have driven the entire auto industry forward, and they deserve tremendous credit for that. But they've also done some things that I fundamentally disagree with, like their entire approach to putting safety critical software into the hands of consumers as experimental betas. This is not something you should ever do. I think their approach is fundamentally wrong and flawed. And whether or not you can make a self-driving system with cameras only, I'll set that argument aside for now. But just putting beta safety critical software into the hands of untrained consumers, I think, is a fundamentally bad idea. And I come at this as an actual engineer, which Elon Musk has no engineering degree. He's not an engineer. He's a business guy. As an engineer that has worked on safety critical software for half of my career, this is something I would never accept. And so, there's that, and also, his attitude towards others, he is very much, I have never felt that he was a good human being. Let me put it that way. He's always, and this has nothing to do with being abrasive. Steve Jobs was prickly. Nobody that knows Steve Jobs, will argue with that. Not that I knew Steve Jobs, but I mean, and everybody agrees that, he had a prickly personality at times. He could be abrasive, and, that's fine. I mean, everybody's got different personalities. I've certainly been abrasive at times, and, arguably, some would argue maybe arrogant at times.
I don't think you're too abrasive and arrogant, Sam. I would not characterize you that way.
I mean, I've softened as I've gotten older.
Okay, fine.
But in my younger years,
Sam was abrasive and arrogant. Okay, I'll give you that.
In my younger years, I could definitely be described as abrasive. But I think one of the comparison to Steve Jobs, I think, is also fundamentally wrong. And I've written about this in the past, and in the last few years, I've tended to shy away from writing about Elon because it's just, gets repetitive. But, I think the fundamental difference between Jobs and Musk is that while both had prickly personalities, Jobs, particularly in the years after he returned to Apple, after he left Apple and then, did Next and Pixar and came back, he changed a lot. He grew up, and he was a lot more self-aware and came to the realization that there's things that he likes to do and he was good at doing, and that and there were also things that he didn't really care about. That he knew that he was not the right person to handle those. And one of the fundamental differences between these two men is that, when Jobs came back to Apple in 1997, he focused on, helping to define the product, working with the design team, making product planning decisions. Here's the products we're going to sell. Here's what they should look like. Here's how they should work. And things like operations, logistics, manufacturing, those were things that he knew were important, but that also weren't within his skill set. And he recognized and delegated those responsibilities to people like Tim Cook, who's now the CEO. And he was not afraid to give to give other people those responsibilities. They were obviously they had the responsibility. He gave them the authority to do their jobs. Musk is not like that. He is not self-aware enough to recognize that there are things he is not good at, and he basically micromanages everything. And ask anybody who's ever worked at Tesla, and you will get the same responses. He thinks he is the only one that can run these enterprises, and he's the only one that can make decisions. And the one exception to that has been at SpaceX, where he has let Gwynne Shotwell actually run the operation on a day-to-day basis. But for the most part, he gets his hands in everything, for better and for ill. Sometimes it works out, a lot of times it doesn't. And while Tesla does employ a lot of people, and that's great, I appreciate that. That doesn't necessarily, the coal industry also employs a lot of people. There's a lot of industries that employ a lot of people that, I'm not necessarily going to promote that. You don't get a free pass, for the bad things you do because of the good things you do. Tesla, in particular, we've heard a lot about racism and misogyny in their factories and their offices. People getting mistreated. And his vehement opposition to, in the early days of the pandemic, to, any sort of, temporary shutdowns, masking, vaccinations. I think he's, there's a lot about him as a person that I think is very problematic, regardless of his politics. I don't agree with his politics either, but this is something long before he turned, to being a far right troll, was very problematic. And so this is why I don't like Elon Musk. I appreciate what Tesla has done. I appreciate what SpaceX has done. But, like, for example, the Boring Company, the Boring Company exists only because, and the Hyperloop, was promoted only as a means to try to derail high-speed rail projects, and mass transit projects, which are much more, mass transit, especially, much more cost effective and useful than something like the Boring Company. So, it's a mixed bag. I don't like him. I appreciate a lot of what the companies have done. And, I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Any final thoughts?
No final thoughts. You spoke your piece.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. And, regardless of how I feel about Elon, I hope you all keep listening, tell your friends, to listen to the show, send in your thoughts. We want it, even if you disagree with us, we want to hear what you think.
And ask Sam less questions that get him less fired up. The man's actually, he's fired up, people. Don't send him on his way all fired up.
All right. Well, this is a long one. With just the two of us, got a lot of content this week.
We did.
And we will talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.